Greetings all, and thank you all for your patience. Welcome to Wu-Sabat Outformation class UK, Lotus of Life Revisited Part 2, brought to you by All Eyes in Egypt, Midlands and the North. So this is a series building on from the Mother Circle of Existence classes that we had done. I think there's about 5 or 6 parts of that. So worth probably going and checking those out on our YouTube channel on All Eyes in Egypt, Midlands and the North. But before in doing that class, we needed to go back over some subjects on Lotus of Life. So we intertwined the two books or series brought from the master teacher, but we felt it was an opportunity to go back and revisit some of the areas in more detail. So if you have read the book, it's going to be useful maybe to go over some subjects in a bit more detail. If you haven't and the subject's new to you, then certainly it's worth going back and checking out Mother Circle of Existence class, checking that out at some point, as well as I say, checking out what we're doing and talking about today. So we'll be jumping around that particular book, not necessarily covering everything in some kind of systematic order, but just focusing on certain subjects and going into them in a bit more detail to aid with your understanding of that subject. So if you had the opportunity, I think has always been emphasized, it's always best to use the latest version of Zoom, but if not, it should be okay for today's session. Okay, so I'm just going to run a quick poll just to make sure you can hear me okay. So one, just very quickly, if you can just check that you can hear me okay over this Om sound, that I'm coming across nice and clear so that you can have the best experience. There's a poll up on your screen if you want to vote on that for me, depending on whether that's a yes, you can hear me okay, or no, you cannot. You might need to swipe left or right on your device in order for the poll to appear. So I'll give you a few seconds more just to answer that. Okay, so it seems most of you can. If there are any problems, please feedback in the chat and we'll do our best to help you resolve whatever issue you're facing. And the second poll just running is, can you see the presentation screen? Okay, excuse the spelling of revisited, should have another I in there for those who are paying attention. So can you see the screen okay? That is what you're answering. Okay, so most can. So you might need to swipe left or right on your device if you cannot see the screen. Yeah, it's important to be able to see the visuals as part of us delivering actual facts to you today. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so what we're going to do is just start with a positive affirmation from the Sabaic language. So don't get too frightened. It's not going to turn you into or transform you into anything. It's about us aligning with our ancestors and starting the class off with positive thinking. Our soul as animists, we believe that, or certainly have the viewpoint or opinion that we descend from a soul force first, and that soul is linked to the mind, which is linked to the mental. So it's always important that in starting off these sessions that we acknowledge that fact and not embarrassed about it, even though sometimes it can feel unfamiliar to us, certainly coming from a monotheistic religious background, be it Jewish, Christian, Muslim, etc., and having those ideals. We were happy to embrace those prayers and language and so on and so forth, and customs and traditions. But now we're stepping back into our stuff. It's important that we, as I say, embrace those in the same point and realign ourselves so that you get, again, a positive experience and your questions answered and what you need to get out of this session today. So this is called Partak Yud, the affirmation. I've never heard it before. Pay close attention more so maybe to the words or the translation, so that you can get some understanding. If you've got questions, feel free to ask them within the session as it evolves. Abdoekele namazurat wu fakur ame kasam un empa paut anuki jawef pa ashuk empa paut wu kale ashuk kawun jawef naya anuki kasam un empa paut wu pa paut kasam un em naya anuki wahu ame pa paut wu pa paut kawun wahu ame naya Nakuk kadur najo ame kasam un empa paut u habub ame mushachas un nakuk kadur kawan kale pafef nakuk tayur jawef pa paut ame wase ame tayarni kawun lakei bakoy jawef pa paut anuki abed bin afashni pa paut kawun anuki Papa ut kadur nakuk kadur. Papa ut amul nakuk amul. So, from translation, we said begin all prayers and thinking as a part of the all expanding. And then we said, I am in the divine love of the all expanding, and all divine love is in me. I am a part of the all expanding, and the all expanding is a part of me. I am one as the all expanding, and the all expanding is one as me. I can succeed as a part of the all expanding and fail as an individual person. I can be all that I want in the all expanding, as long as my want is to stay in the all expanding. I am never by myself. The all expanding is, I am. The all expanding can, I can. The all expanding does, I do. So that was positive affirmation there called Partakyud. Now, again, very quickly for those joining us for the first time on the Zoom platform, and welcome to those obviously joining us on Facebook Live. If you do want the full interactive, experience, then by all means use the link for class 1 in the chat and join us. If you've not registered before, register. Takes less than 30 seconds, and join us on the actual session today. And that means that your questions that you've got, and this what I'm describing on the screen, will work for you. On Facebook Live, it's only a view only platform. If there are any questions, etc., then we're not monitoring it live, so we'll pick them up after the session today. So if you do want to interact, then by all means join us on Zoom. But if you want to stay on Facebook Live, then equally that is fine. So if you've got any messages which are not questions, looking at this panel here, then please select everyone as your distribution option. Those options may be slightly different if you're on a different version of Zoom. So it may be all participants or something of that nature. Select that option so that everybody can see what you're posting. If you need to adjust your audio settings, then the options are there on the left as well. If you want to ask questions, and there's 2 ways to do that. So you can raise your hand, and then when the appropriate time is, you'll be unmuted and then ask your question directly. You'll be asked to unmute yourself by this message appearing on your screen. If you've dialed in, then those options are slightly different. So it's *9 to raise your hand, and *6 to unmute yourself, and then *6 again to mute yourself back. So once you've got the ability to unmute yourself, given to you by the facilitators today, then you can mute yourself and unmute yourself at will. So we just ask that you stay muted after you've asked your question, as to not disturb the rest of the meeting. Now, the other way to ask questions is if you don't want to come through live and ask the question directly yourself, then you can place a written question by pressing the Q&A button, and effectively the facilitators will ask those questions on your behalf. Again, if there's something you don't think is answered correctly or needs clarification, please follow up and put your comments back in that Q&A section so that we can get your questions answered for you. Again, if there's something you do not understand or it's not clear, then please do not sit there in ignorance. Ask your questions. Obviously, I'm your student teacher today. There's other facilitators on the call as well. So we do your best to answer your questions. If there's something, as I say, that is not clear or we can't answer, we're just going to simply say we don't know, you understand, rather than mislead, or we'll find out. So we'll come back and give you the answer to those questions. So questions, generally speaking, are focused on the subject area. And that's just because it's so vast, Wu-Sabat, or our doctrine, that what we seek to do is really give some focus. Back in the day, we'd sit here and just answer any old question, say any old question, for disrespect, excuse me for that, but we answer questions from anybody, any source, anything, etc. And around about in 1995, there was a lecture done by Dr. Malachi Z for us to really move away from that, so we could focus on specific subjects and deliver or gain some better understanding of things. So we have a subject class or a topic class, and we're generally focused on that topic. If it's worth it to deviate, then obviously we'll do so, but generally speaking, it's to help you get understanding of this particular subject, like you would in university or school. When you go into uni and you go into a chemistry class, you're not going to ask questions about I know the French language, for example, because the questions are focused on, it's a chemistry class, do you understand? So it helps you to get the most out of a particular subject, and it also shows me that you're paying attention so to what's being said. But as I say, if it's worth it to deviate, then again, the skill, I suppose, of the questioner is to ask it in a way that makes sense to what we're talking about today. Okay, right, let's keep it moving then. So I'm going to do a short introduction there's no poll questions. There's no quiz today. I didn't feel there was enough. We've taught you enough, so definitely next time we'll probably be doing something in and around that. So be ready for that and pay attention, because there'll definitely be the questions more on this session and obviously the last one of part one that we did as well. So who is the master teacher? And because we're doing Lotus of Life, interesting enough, the pictures that you're seeing on the screen here are from that scroll. So in effect, we've always really been teaching you or showing you that from that scroll, which is based really on the introduction. And well, who is the master teacher? And that's the kind of question that's set out in the introduction, that scroll, in some detail. And it's important, as we've really made the point many times before, that when you do with any organization, when you pick up a book and things of that nature, that you understand something about who the author is, or you're doing an in-depth research maybe on who the author is, their kind of background, their understanding, etc., because it's going to impact the way in which how they use words and how they define words. And so more important, I suppose, for Nagar Nadu, that's Negroids, and those who respect and follow our culture, who can be considered also as part of our family, is to, in moving away from some of the tricks and games and the spells that's been cast upon us, that we have to do a more in-depth subject on that. And as we step through this class a little bit today, we may emphasize that point, because perspective is very important insofar as how it relates into what you import into your being, you understand? So you want to be cognizant that when you're taking information, if it's for you, then you're going to treat the information a certain way. If it's not for you, then you need to treat this information in another way. You understand? So not assume. Yeah, you need to kind of find a position where you know things. You understand? And what you'll find certainly on this planet, as it pertains to religious information, that often it's tailored for the people of who are of the family or tribe or the genetics of the most prominent person in that religion. You understand? So if I'm a Christian and it's Jesus, then he said he was sent to his own. Somebody else can turn around and say, well, he was sent to the whole world. But according to what's in the book, of the words they wrote about him, he had an own. You understand? He had an own. I came to my own, and my own receiveth me not. So he had an own. And some people might say, well, that is, those who follow his religion, do you understand? But he didn't bring Christianity. Yeah, somebody else named it after he left. You understand? So, but for us, not getting into that in too much detail, the fact of the matter is it was tailored for a group of people. You understand? So what you got to realize, if you then delve into that and you're not one of the people who it was tailored for, then really and truly you're putting your soul at risk. Yeah, because of harm potentially, because you're indulging in something that wasn't designed for you and your genetics, or people of your genetics. And so this is something that's long been hidden from our people, and it's something, as I say, in the new knowledge, and saying the right knowledge, and us applying right wisdom into right understanding, then we now need to look at, as I say, what we're importing, what's important, what we're taking in, and who's teaching it. Do you understand? Because many teachers who have come will make certain claims of who they say they are. Do you understand? And so you need to pay attention to that, because if somebody's saying, yeah, I'm a mechanic, then you know what to look for them. Someone's saying they're an electrician, you know what to look for them. Do you understand? Other tests, whether they are an electrician or whether they are a mechanic, well, you're going to have to put that to the test to see whether they can back up their various different claims that they're saying. Do you understand? So in Grandma's words of wisdom, they say, yeah, don't judge a book by its cover. Yeah, and the response is, well, that's stupid. You need to judge a book by its cover and its content. Do you understand? So otherwise, how would you know what's in the book? Yeah, for the book, you judge it by its content and its cover. Yeah, they say don't judge a book by, well, that's a stupid saying. So this is what we're talking about here, insofar as the importance of teachers, and why, as I say, you're given this information in a lot of these books or whatever, or some of the older stuff, of this is who I am, this is my where I've walked, where I've traveled, so that you can see the perspective oftentimes of where this individual is coming from. So you've got a fair shot at analysing what's being said, and obviously on your own personal journey, at least, you should be seeking confirmation. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. So Dr. Malachi Z York, or ZK York, Okran, born in Takoradi, Ghana, just obviously I think last Sunday celebrated his 77th birthday, which also happens to be the Sabian New Year in our own calendar, and he was born to Mary Abba Okran York. Yeah, and so they make the point in the beginning of the book with some documentation shown of his Ghanaian origin, from Takoradi in West Africa, as I say, born June 26, 1945. So she makes a declaration in that regard, and saying that, well, she didn't inform her son of his heritage till much later in his life, and there's a whole story around that at that time about how he was born, as she was in a marriage with a person named David P. York, but then they'd split up, and then she went over to Africa, and then got with his father, and so at that time that was seen as particularly difficult for a female at that time. Now the point is that, to get into all that detail, but the fact of the matter is that in Ghanaian culture, or the Akan culture in Ghana, I should say, which is one of the tribes, or many tribes in Ghana, it is a matriarchal tribe. So the importance of her as a feminine or sacred feminine at that time, making that declaration in Akan law and in Ghana, and which Ghana recognizes, her saying that, well, that's my son and that's where he was born, etc., carries weight. Yes, so in a matriarchal setting. So When you see, I say, for those who are lucky enough or able to get the book or whatever, you'll see that declaration in there in some detail. And what I'm saying is, don't underestimate its weight. So in that culture, what the woman says goes. Now, in the Western Hemisphere, patriarchal setting, maybe it's not as important, understood, but it still carries even weight, because whoever the woman says is the father, whether it is the father or not, it still carries weight in it, who they put on the birth certificate. But specifically, as I say, from a matriarchal perspective, he is Ghanaian in that regard, and it's important, as I say, insofar as I say the mitochondrial link, because it is a matriarchal culture there. And so even when you deal with things like inheritance, who your mother is very important to who inherits what in terms of lineage. You understand? So the mitochondrial line means that, as I say, your genes are passed on through the feminine line, you understand, not through the male line. So it's in line with natural nature. As I say, as we've said before, if you have a male child, the genes only go one generation forward. So i.e., if you have a son, then your generation goes forward with your son. It doesn't pass from son to son. If you want to carry on your lineage, you must have a daughter. So what exists there in those Akan tribes in Ghana is exactly the same, or a very similar system to what was there in ancient Egypt. Yeah, Kadem Mukmatu, Kadem Mahmat, ancient Egypt, and they had that same system in the same, again, which is not popularly known. Whereas I say, in order to carry on the line, you must have a daughter. You understand? So the royal lineage, as you would call it, or lineage, is carried through the female line only. You understand? And this is to say, in line with natural nature. As I say, when the sperm and the ovum fuse together, the ovum and the DNA within inside dominates the sperm, and the Y or YAP DNA, YAP DNA, YAP DNA, which carries the male genetic line or history, is in the tail of the sperm. The tail drops off, and the DNA that's left is basically overwhelmed, is maybe a better word to use, by the female DNA, and so therefore the lineage is not carried across. Understood? So we have different roles, etc., as men and women, and as I say, this is what we're seeking really to make clearer in terms of opening your eyes to this ancient culture now being brought back to you today. So feminine dominant culture in line with natural nature. So Mary Abba York, as I say, and in that culture being rebrought back today, then she was the clan mother, or is the clan mother, but now transitioned, obviously passed over to the other side, and so then that was passed on to her daughter, Mokpatauret Kimamtat Mokpatauret Atumraye, and so you see in the clan mother attire here, as I say, you see the renewal of our story coming back around again. Understood? And even there, for those who have the eyes to see, we see some lotuses on the actual symbol here. In a sense, you see them in their symbol of, obviously, regeneration. We covered that class as well. You see them here as well. So this lotus flower, symbol of regeneration, the lotus of life. When we talk about the lotus of life very specifically, then that is talking about the female Zahar, which means flower or vaginal area, and its composite parts broken down into 9 different sections. As I say, it is a symbol, generally speaking, of regeneration, as the mother is a symbol of regeneration. So his father, we probably need to do a class on him. I always feel like we're not doing him proper justice in that regard. So maybe we'll do a class on the guidance. So Al-Hadi Abdul Rahman Al-Mahdi, say born 1922, and say is the Dr. Malachi Z York's father. Say birth 1922, crossed over in 1970. Unfortunately, was assassinated, and has the name the Mahdi. which means the guide, which links him back again into the Sudanese side of his family on that side of things. And so you see a great history there, royal family within Sudan, and ties back into Al-Hadi Abdul Rahman al-Mahdi's grandfather, Sayyid Muhammad Ahmad al-Mahdi, who was known as the Mahdi, or the guide in that time, again from the Dongolawi tribe, but of ancient Egyptian origin, but was hired by the Sudanese, to drive the British and the Turks out of Africa. Now, interestingly enough, I was watching a film the other day called Dune, D-U-N-E, Dune. Some of you may have seen it, and you see that they're referring to the principal character in the movie as the Mahdi. Interesting enough, an extraterrestrial story, but you note that they're referring to him as the Mahdi. You know what I'm saying? And so, as they like with a lot of their movies, they use actual terms and terminologies that exist in the real world, which helps to give their fiction some grounding in reality. So it makes the illusion appear more real by using real world terms in a fictional context, understood? So you can see there, even though the Muslim world do not accept this individual as the Mahdi, simply because he came in a color that's not their color. You understand? So racism firmly exists within the Islamic and Arabicized world. So because this individual's freckles were too close, as we say, they don't accept him as that position. But for our understanding, at it pointing to us, is basically an example of an individual born into this world who had mastery of spirituality. As they call him a karama in their language, which is a master spiritualist. Do you understand? So control of what you would consider to be black magic, and black magic is nothing horrific or anything like that. To us, it's when the forces of nature work for you and you are black. Yeah, if you look at the so-called night sky, what color is it? You understand? So it's when you have control or access to utilize the forces of nature, as I say, for whatever. In this particular case, it was for defense. Understand? And as I say, they dealt with what would be considered to be a highly technological army in terms of the British and the Turks, and drove them out of Africa, where, as I say, the Brits and Turks had cannons, spears, cannons, guns, understand, formidable weaponry that we consider today, against the spears of the Ansars, and they were able to overcome them. So and had the confidence as well to do so, being led by this individual. 100 years after, exactly 100 years after, you can see that the reformer, as they would call it in the Islamic degree, was born. So whichever direction you go, all roads lead back to ancient Egypt or ancient Africa. They all lead back there. And so this combination was utilized, as say, to bring a particular individual into the world, called by the ancient Egyptians an Amun Nabab Reye Akhtar. Understood, I should say. That's the proper title. The Egyptians referred to the being as Tahuti. Now, this is our way, as I say, of informing, outforming into informing. Understood? So our so-called outformation comes from above, in a sense, to informing who is obviously present here on the planet Earth. And so there's a system that's been in place, as I say, for many millions of years, of our ancestors guiding us by sending, say, prominent teachers in and amongst us to raise us and to keep us aligned with ways of natural nature, and to develop for us, obviously, for our ascension journey. This is just one level of it. You understand? Some say Earth is a school. And so this is one level, as I say, of our ascension journey for us to master, which we'll be covering, as I say, in a lot of detail today. So this is him at age 25, where he says he was housed by a being named El Khadir, or he was known at that time. And this combination was necessary to deal with the religious misinformation, as I say, that had put us under the spell of Leviathan, as they call it in the Bible. And so the first 30 years, because each elder is given an hour, was dedicated to unraveling that spell in terms of the religious information, which basically, as I say, to keep it simple, causes us to be subjugated to other races. When you look at the iconography of those religions, it causes us to be subject or underneath another race of people, whether it's obvious or whether it's subliminal. You understand? When you look at the imagery of most of the religions that certainly black people or Nagarnadu Negroids tend to follow, they're not worshipping themselves in those religions. So that's some of the mental damage, as I say, that gets caused by that. And you think about how can a first world people, i.e. people who were here on the planet first, be worshipping an image, not in an image, as I say, not after their own likeness, and everybody else is doing that and we're not. So this is the subtle sort of racism that's in many of the institutions that sit around and govern us. And as I say, we're sort of putting our soul on a roulette wheel, understood, hoping that when we get to the point of death and we're supposed to transition to whatever they've promised in their holy books, which they say they have the oldest but not the originals, yes, that's supposed to lead to us fulfilling some fate based on how we've lived on earth thus far. So if we want to put our trust, the only thing you can base that decision upon is how you've been treated on the planet to date. So you got to look at those information sources and who wrote the books and who they're descended from and how they've treated our people, whether you're going to invest, as I say, your soul on this Russian roulette wheel and hope at the end of that whatever they've told you is true. You understand? And once you're dead, it's too late. So you can either bet on them, an Arab, if it's Islam, you understand, and the Muslim world, or you can bet on the Caucasians if it's the Christian world, or you can bet on the Jews who are controlling the sort of Mosesism or Judaic doctrine, so to speak, and bet on them. You understand? But if you look at how certain things have gone while we're living, well, you understand, really and truly, it doesn't seem to be a sensible decision based on how you've been treated whilst you've been alive. Understand? So, yeah, if you can marry any of their daughters, yeah, or their sons comfortably, then yeah, if you can marry any of their sons or daughters comfortably in those cultures and religions, then yeah, good luck with that. You understand? But that shows you understand, whether if you're going to be treated like that on that side, well, hey, on the other side, you probably should give you an indication of how it's going to go. Yeah. So, Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn and Dr. Malachi Z. York. So after the spell was broken, 9th of September 1999, and we're now coming into our cycle of information. So we're not dealing with those what they call basic information before you leave for the first 3 degrees, as they would have it: Mosesism, Mohammedism, and Christism. Do you understand? So in terms of those basic kind of degrees of study, one may argue, after those were mastered, seemingly, then it was now time for us to, as I say, be given the real deal information. Wu-Sabat, yeah, so our spiritual science, or the spiritual science of the Nagarnadu or Negroids, which helps us, as I say, not only to unify mentally, but to unify physically also. So a new combination was needed, say, of Yaanuwn, or the being Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, and Dr. Malachi Z. York in terms of the physical being, and then the etheric being inside, responsible for guiding the pen of the master teacher, then was to say responsible for bringing us that new cycle information. So part of a very organized plan to really unravel us from the spell. And so when you understand that, you can look at certain key or prominent figures. We have many different teachers or leaders who have come along and given us really part of the story, but now in the last days and times, as they would have it, now you're getting the real deal information from Dr. Malachi Z. York as the last point, as I say, to bring in the new 24,000 year cycle. Understood? And as you can see on the screen, where we've gone through many different degrees, yeah. And then the ninth chamber was bringing us now into the launch of the ancient Egyptian order. You understand? So we're then back now, who we're supposed to be, taking that long walk on a short path. Yes, a lot of information had to be conveyed in a short period of time. And so, but even in their religious books, they predict that basically the world, so would have it, the mystery of God would be finished. So this understanding that all these titles or religious titles that have been used in the monotheistic religions that dominate the planet basically are nothing more than extraterrestrials, if we're using modern day language, called the Anunnaki in the Sumerian doctrine. And so your biblical and Quranic stories and Judaic stories are basically copies from these from ancient tablets, Numer Elish and Gilgamesh epics in particular. And as I say, many things that we think we know, the master teacher, even now, even though they're not books of our race, I'm saying that very specifically, but I'm still uncovering things that will make your eyes open even today. So the fact that if you think about here, we see a breakdown of the sons of the Most High, who they call Anu. You understand? So yeah, Anu, and then Enki and Enlil in particular, the two brothers who the biblical doctrines are based upon. Hence why you have the Yah prophets, Elijah, Jeremiah, and a lot of other Yahs in that regard. And then you have the El prophets, Daniel, who else? We got Ezekiel and others. You understand? So you've got a differentiation between the two types because you've got two primary deities running through the Bible. You understand? And then then into the Quran, which is a copy of the Bible. You understand? And the Torah is included in that. So the fact of the matter is that you have deities or extraterrestrials interpreted as deities or gods, various different terminologies and titles with their own agenda, who have, let's say, for the last 6,000 years, dominated and been pulling the strings, and say, of various human beings of their own descendancy, creating beings in the image and after their likeness, leading to the birth of, say, the Caucasian race particularly, and many other sub-races, but not our Most High. Understand? And interesting enough, you look at this verse here from Natural Ether Energy. Yes, it's saying to you here, both sons of the Most High God Anu, talking about Enki and Enlil, as one God. So that's how they appeared, because we didn't have eyes and understanding that those positions, these terminologies, God, Most High, Almighty, different things, are just simply positions within a certain hierarchy of the Anunnaki, which has been, because of bad translations, you don't have an understanding that it's many different beings. Understood? Even though in the Hebrew language, Elohim, which is has a yod and a mim on the end of it, the I and the M in terms of the translation, is equivalent to the English S. You understand? And so that means three or more beings, and that's the term used when they say in the beginning God created, where the word God there is translated from Aramaic or Hebrew language as say Elohim, which were I, yod and a mim, or equivalent is M at the end, three or more, going from Elohim to, and then Elo, obviously, which is singular. Understood? So the fact of the matter is, this verse is in particular important for us because saying both sons of the Most High God Anu as one God. So they use us. So some Sabians or whatever caught up in the Sumerian doctrine, still using terms like Nibiru, interested in Nibiru and things of that nature. Well, this is telling you here, they use us, we as one, or me. So the writer is saying this for both of their orders. So now, people may ask, well, hold on a minute, when you look at holy tablets and different types of books, it's got Anu all the way through, etc. But as I say, Remember, we're uncovering various different layers, isn't it, of how the spell was imparted upon us and walking all the way back, understood, to the original. Now, part certain times of the spiritual or esoteric journey is what they refer to as negation. Do you understand? So you're basically saying what a thing isn't, so that then you're left, so you're peeling back layers of what it isn't, and so you're left with exactly what the thing is. Do you understand? And so that origin is walking us all the way back as part of that. Now that Amun Nabi, Amun Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, you understand, as a vehicle or a vessel allowing our ancestors to speak through, means that you're getting information from the various different sources or individuals directly, so that we get clear details about what has taken place in the past, because we're all filled into this mental reservoir of Outformation. But the Amun Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn has obviously direct access, able to draw down certain information, so we're clear about what took place in certain instances and how the game got played, etc., etc. But you see, they have their own agendas, and this is why it's important to understand that's not our Most High. You understand? So obviously, which we're going to step through and show, because our genes have been tampered with, we can see there that we may have some element of Anunnaki link in us, because the genes have been mixed in and tampered with. So we need to understand what those stories are, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's who we are. You understand? In terms of our original origin, of us cleaning ourselves outside in, inside out and outside in. Understood? So it's important to pay attention. A lot of people get stuck along the way as we on that journey. You understand? They're still using these old terminologies, but as you see, yeah, they use us. They're in black and white. So you can see there, even in we're showing here, there who they're calling the devil in their doctrine is actually a being by the name of Anar. You understand? The name means master of fire. And so this is the so-called, well, the principal character they're calling Satan or the devil, whatever, in their so-called story. And as you can see here, you know, linked in to El Shaddai, which means the Almighty. There. So this was part of what was being uncovered for us. You see here the positive so-called agreeable angels versus the so-called disagreeable ones called the Dingir versus the Ikiki. Yeah, and the context and story, as I say, of how that was to play out, and us understanding, as I say, who's sitting in the seat. Yeah, who is really the Wizard of Oz? Yes, getting behind that story and seeing and really tearing off the mask to see the face of God in this context. Yeah, so it had no control over us insofar as us being stumped to question it. We just accepted it and believed who it is, what it was, anything that was said, even though it didn't make sense. You understand? And in actuality, those translations are really just the mind of the Caucasian, and so it keeps us subservient to that and pacified against any kind of rebellion for us, as I say, to want to work for and live by one another. You understand? An excellent plan and game that was played to keep us separated, overstood, so that, as I say, and we've said this many times before, but the whole system is set up, as I say, for you to die in ignorance, and then you become an etheric battery, as I say, for these lower forces, because you have the soul that everybody wants. Not everybody on the planet has soul. Not everybody has the link back to the Nathar, do you understand, who should be seen as sons. Not everybody has a link to that power. So you don't realize, as Negroids or Nagaru, your own value. You understand? We say this before many times in this class, yet you don't know the value of the soul. You understand? You don't know. You understand? You're ignorant of it. And so you don't know what others would be willing to do, even to get a piece of it. Yeah. So if you knew the value, you'd understand why the system's set up in the way it's done. Yeah. So it's set up to take advantage, to abuse. You understand? And even in that word abuse, you see the word use in there. You understand? So some don't see everybody on the planet as equal. You understand? You have to understand that. cannot assume because of certain slogans like, "We're all the same under the skin," do you understand? Or some Benetton advert and things of that nature. Yes, it would be nice if that was the case, but it's not the reality of where we're living, the existence that we're experiencing right now. Understand? So even again, it's just a Lotus life and be more feminine centric. Then you can see here that the term here used in Genesis 7:1-4, Genesis 15:1, where they use the term Anuki, understand, Anochi, as opposed to Anai, Ani. Understood? Anuki is female, understand, in the grammatical language of Hebrew, and Anai is male. Understood? So here we can see that females in this context were there, or in this context, one called Inanna, they refer to as Ishtar. So so we can see here that the feminine hand was there also within these group of deities or extraterrestrials who have been interpreted as gods, but these extraterrestrials were patriarchal, hence why these monotheistic religions are also patriarchal in that context. So let's move forwards and run out of time. So here we show you again sort of an excerpt from what is Nawapu, I think originally released in 1992, and then had some revisions later down the line. But here it's showing you that the feminine forces of nature, makes the Amunabab Rayet Hakta. Understand? So here we clearly see that, which we've been obviously expressing to you about this matriarchal system that's in place, and that's the sort of system of natural nature has informed what's been described as nature, a system of rules which govern the existence, almost a self-autonomous system, which is pretty amazing. Our body obviously works in line with it. The planet works in line with it, solar system, universe, so on and so forth, works in line with this system of rules. But it's feminine in origin, insane, and it's saying here that it gave birth to this being that comes to renew our story, you understand? And so disclose to the people, especially of his own kind. So we're not even racist, like we're not even dealing with wrong racism. If you respect the culture and you align yourself with us, then we consider you as part of the family, even though maybe genetically you're not of our origin, because as I say, we are the originals. But importantly, came to disclose three things: the hidden past. So remember, all that information, spiritual ignorance and racial blindness is one of the definitions of an aspect of the spell. So we had no information or detailed information about our past, particularly that past, what they call the kidnapping or slavery. The change in present, so being ready for what is taking place right now, having information in advance of where we're at presently, so that, as I say, we will be prepared for it and then be able to avoid situations and move accordingly for our own survival. And then the ruling future. So we're replacing what they call faith, Faith, with taking control of our fate once again. So it's showing you here that this being having access to all knowledge as the presence of the Natharu, and here on this planet to inform their children with Outformation, but obviously giving them the necessary information that they would need in order to transform themselves from mortals back into deities again. Now, as I say, the ancient Egyptians referred to this being as Tahuti, who's more famous or more commonly known. And when you look at the Achach in the name there, you can see why that is particularly relevant, because that ties in to the sacred ibis bird in ancient Africa. Understood? So there are represented, if you look at the Safaf of the name, it ties into the ibis bird, and various different birds, who was there always to aid in one of our stories, was there to aid Hara in his battle against Earth's attack. You understand? So here, I'm just going to go forward slightly just to check something here. So I'm going to go back to stuff in between. So we are dealing with the topics that we're looking at today. Now here you see that science of Wu-Sabat, is dealing with, and relative is, we deal with numbers and the symbolism around that. But it's showing you that the 9, which is the highest number that you can get, represents natural nature, blackness, understood, as opposed to Zupu, which is dealing with fire, understood. And if you think about why the religions focused on being enlightened when we exist within a dark existence, yes, the majority of the world or the existence that we experience is darkness. You understand? There's a small aspect of it that is dealing with light, understood, but the blackness has been taught to you as negative, when in actuality, to the original people, understand, and who are the origins of all the different races here on the planet Earth today, it was positive, because it's the absence of confusion, peace, tranquility, as opposed to light. With the emergence of light is chaos, understood. Now what we need to do is pay some attention now to these symbols, because we've been looking at these in a lot more detail. So we see these new bowls here, or the symbol of the new bowl here, which, as I say, can represent a number of things, but the womb is one of them. Now here you see that this symbol here, which we showed you, which represents the sound, and then we've got here the Palel, which is a stool, P-A-L-E-L, so Palel, and then we've got sound again here. So now symbolically they show you that Nupu is water in the sand, Zarek, blue in color, and its opposite here is what? So the opposite here is the 6, as in 6 evil forces, and it's called Zupu. So as we showed you before, you take that same N, isn't it? You turn it 90 degrees clockwise, yes, and then we end up with the Zupu again. Now what you see here now, if you're paying attention, if I go between these, you see that that symbol there is now inverted. See, we may not have seen that before, but it says inverted. So when it's shown like this, it means ether. Correct? For those who were paying attention when we did the previous class, Mother Circle of Existence. And when we see it this way, it means hair. Now let's keep it on a higher plane for the moment before we get into the physical. So when we're just talking about forces, we can see it means death, decay, dying, as opposed to the forces of what? Life, alive, living. In terms of positive ether, and then ether in death. So ether, which is gas, or types of gases, you know what I'm saying? All existing energies represent 9 ether, and then benign ether in death is 6 ether. So as it starts to decay, death, dying, and importantly, we see here this safaf, or hieroglyph, as they falsely call it, is a lock, zabas, you see there, or bolt. So the question that you may ask yourself, okay, what is it cutting off us from? So we're being cut off there from something, because when you look back at the name, Amunabab Rayach Pata, you see ta there. So ta there, what does ta translate to? Ta is what? The opener. Understood? I won't get into all the secrets that are around the name, but here, let's say Ray. You think about sun rays. Sun rays are coming from outside the planet Earth, understood, into the planet Earth, correct? So it's a form of outformation coming in. or extraterrestrial. Yeah, because those particles are coming from outside in to the planet. Understood? So here, the hidden something, you understand? Yeah, Ray. And then here we're talking about this etheric energy, or higher state of us being opened, in terms of the renewal of our story. Now, story has a sort of double meaning. It can relate to the past, but it also is, you think about it, it's a level on a building, isn't it? Yeah, in America, that is. But it's a story as in a level on a building, isn't it? So you could look at it as well that, well, there was a certain level of access that we didn't have access to, and that's because we were in a state of ignorance. We were mentally dead. Yeah, and some being is coming along to open the way back up again. Yeah, restore our connection to the mental, or put us back in our own mind again. Understood? So when we look, just going back to these symbols for a moment, we can see here, say that there's this lock. Understood? Yeah. And again, we see our same symbols inverted. So we see, yeah, it does mean ulaf. Yes, that's where we get our sound, ulaf or walaf. But see, walaf there is a W anyway. So it's a sound, which creates a zupu sound. But we know in this context that in us, when we're looking at it, what it means, let's say, hair, when it's reversed in that context. Now, if you look carefully at the symbol for mummy, yeah, Zaha, we see again this Zabas or bolt or lock. Yep, we see the forearm here, which is called the Thanad, and that gives an A sound, even though it starts with a ZH in English equivalent. Thanad, and then we see the helix there, which is the Habal. It's like a flax symbol there, which is also in the name Taha, in the sense as the ha sound within it. So we can see here that the mummy, is obviously designed to lock in. So nothing can get in and nothing can get out. And we understand that because mummification, as we explained in the previous session, remember, was designed to lock in the genes, isn't it? So we removed certain organs or whatever that would decay. We wanted to keep those genes preserved so they could be reanimated or recloned later down the line, which whatever disease the person died from would be cured into the future. So you could see the purpose of the lock locks everything from getting in, because you don't want anything else in there. So it's airtight, isn't it? You don't want it to decay really any further, and you don't want any germs which are within the seal or the wrappings or whatever and the tomb to get out, where it may be responsible for causing diseases. So let me explain to you before how in the West, in cities, they willfully, understand, put cemeteries and other things in and around where people live. And so, and they're not necessarily airtight. So, all the decay is throwing all this kind of disease, which then human beings are breathing in, and taking into their being disease there, which obviously allows those 6 evil forces to thrive. Now, when we look here at the terms for man and woman, we see that same lock in there. Yeah, the Zabat symbol is in the hieroglyph for man here. Yeah, and then you see the tat symbol there. So Zazaz tat and Zazaz. So what it's showing you here is that the man and the woman, understood, are cut off from the higher self. Understood? They're cut off because this lock is there in the symbol. Or some may say, the soul is trapped, isn't it, in this skin suit. Yeah, they're almost opposed to each other. Understand? And certainly, if you think about us being dumbfounded in religions not of our own culture, which ordinarily would not only, the lock would not be there, understood, yeah, but certainly would, would help us basically, if the lock was in place, to remove it, yeah, so that we would be transforming from that 360 physical and also the 360 esoteric or spiritual to become 720 again, to become complete, understood. So in one sense, having access to our higher senses, we all work on the basis of the five senses, or five so-called senses, but access to our higher senses is missing from us, isn't it? Because the removal of a gland that used to be in the hippocampus area of the brain called the Ba'h gland, in the same, which gave us access to our four higher senses, isn't it? Psychometry, telepathy, clairvoyance, and intuition. You understand? So, and then when we was complete, we were referred to as Nathar Patar 10. You understand? Nathar Patar 10 is a being that has their full senses complete, understood, in the physical context, which is what our ancestors had, because that Ba'h gland, in a sense, secreted, obviously, as you know, mafruzat, or liquid gold, into the bloodstream, understood, which gave us access, as I say. We were complete in that, understand, using all of our 9 glands in our endocrinal glandular system. So you can see there with these basic symbols there how our story has been unfolded or secreted to us by the master teacher in these ways. Now it's causing us to now have to think in, when we're looking at these things, is to look, people might say deeper, but it's more a case of, look, paying attention to your story. We're not here to sound heavy or, understand, to entertain. We're here to inform, understood, so that you can realign. Yeah, so that, and the reason why we do the tests, different things of that nature, is to force us, either as existing Sabians or people interested in the culture, to start to think with a Sabian mind once again. You understand? So that you can look at these symbols and you start to see, okay, that's starting to make a bit more sense to me. So if you can go through, you know, when you're reading something, it doesn't make sense in the beginning. If we can move through that fog and haze, etc., and things become clear, obviously that's what we're seeking. That's us realigning again. So we can see that the man, which is one step above beast, understood. You think about manifestation, it's got the word man in there, manifesting the planet. So here we see that these symbols are very staged. Now, of course, they're not negative in the context of our existence, but to exist here, obviously, you need to be in a human body. You understood? And the health of that body and the amazement of it is quite frankly something that, you know, our ancestors blessed us with the best of the best, you understand, in that context. But in terms of our esoteric journey, ashes to ashes, they say, dust to dust, there's a certain point where obviously the body will return to the ground and we will still continue that ascension journey. So the same symbols, which to us can be positive, can also obviously be negative in the context of misuse. So the religious mind has held us captive and trapped, yeah, because it willfully locked us out in the sand. Or 6 ether is designed to lock us out of that high information, yeah, which causes us to decay and eventually die, which is what the nature of fire is. Yeah? It's consuming, in the sand, in that regard. But the 6 obviously never overcomes the 9. In the sense, when people see 666 and they get frightened, well, 666 adds up to 18. In the sense, 1 plus 8 is 9. So the doesn't, as I say, can never overpower the 9 in that regard. Now, it represents obviously right or negative in terms of tonation and absolute unnatural nature. So natural nature and unnatural nature, you understand, the acceptance of it is all part of existence, understood. But at this higher level, you need to understand how these forces work within existence, and why, as I say, you've got this being, who's been sent very specifically to unlock, and transform us by using the power of this information and bring to us that spiritual science of Wu-Sabat, which is the key to transform Outformation into information. Do you understand? So here we see that we're strictly dealing with factual information, and that your journey in and of itself is these 9 steps. So those questions there, but then we get to 7, importantly, you want proof, then you're seeking confirmation, and then in the ontological bit of it, so you're interested in the science or the essence of things, that what the thing is now revealed to you. So ultimately, you can see, even if you just look in the mirror and you stare at yourself for 10 to 15 seconds, you'll get the feeling of the inner being looking out at the outer shell, the real you understand, looking out at the outer shell. And that's even showing you, well, there's layers on you. Your layers on you. So you're in this skin suit. So obviously we spend a lot of time and energy focused on the skin suit, but not developing the energy of the soul and the connection it has to our mental. Understood? And so this is why, as I say, it's important, and part of that transformational journey was taking us back to understanding the importance of that feminine information, because as we expressed in part 1, it's telling you here what the source of it is, that it gave birth or makes it. So there it's taking control to correct that which is now considered to be in this cycle unnatural. It has steered away from the original rules and now must be brought back to, as some describe it, as a pristine purity or whatever. But that is based on, as I say, facts, not dealing with belief. It's based on facts. Understood? And so the way the class is structured in this way is to give you at least the fair opportunity by using pictures and different media sources, so that you can at least go away and do your own research if necessary, to seek that confirmation. Do you understand? Because, as I say, the Mukasu, particularly, or the Caucasian world, has had us, as I say, under this spell for the last 6,000 or so years, and it's now obviously not just breaking it. It's a case of us, more importantly, becoming who and what we are by nature, and not what we have accepted, as they say, because of the decisions that we've made, often for survival in this society. So when you look at these symbols again, you can see the influence of 2 genetic lines there on our genes in us, which is why we need to understand about both. But they have a clear distinction in terms of who their extraterrestrial ancestors, understand, have then informed the creation of. So the white race is the representation of what we would describe as those Zupu forces here, and who their, as I say, ancestors or overlords tie into, as you see there in the image and afterlife, so the Pleiadians. But later down the line, that these Anunnaki came in and took over that project, having control of those Pleiadians, and created a being, as I say, who was in the image and after their likeness as a food source. So a grafted man, understood? Now, not interested in wrong racism. Do you understand? We're just teaching factual information of who's who here on the planet Earth. And that unnatural nature, so if you think that facts, confirmation is what 9 represents, then mythology, do you understand, theology, faith, beliefs, etc., is what 6 represents. And when you look at the proliferation of what we see in the world today, because based on who's controlling it, we see a world dominated by fiction, myth, and in the context of men controlling the world, well, we look at DUF 1220, which is called the designer genes, understood, which is a combination of Pleiadian, Anunnaki, and Simian genes primarily. Then it shows the mental capacity of the Caucasoid or Mukasu, it doesn't age past the age of 13, because the simian genes used, like the chimpanzee, basically his mental capacity is that of a small child. You understand? Never really above that. So the world is under the impression that intelligence, we don't even realize that intelligence that we're seeing here is basically that of a 13-year-old, very competent 13-year-old, it may seem, but yet that, maybe we haven't been exposed, other than in cultures that lived before, to those higher states of real maturity, which is when we think about what is really the focus in main societies, or what dominates oftentimes the media, is fictional stories in the main, and it's games. You understand? Yeah, we play a lot of games. Yeah, so whether it's the PS5, the Xbox, whatever the case may be, yeah, a lot of the world's into gaming and things of that nature. Those games then translate into, what do we see? We see wars, inability to resolve conflict, and things of that nature are all things, yeah, even though we say children are positive and some consider them to be pure, etc., yes, that is true, but the immaturity of it is childish. We see if people start getting into arguments over inconsequential things, which may lead to therefore certain people getting injured, we would describe that as a certain level of immaturity, of a person not being able to control their emotions in certain situations. You understand? Some things you can see right now, particularly with the violence in some inner city communities in particular, yeah, people are getting killed over, we would describe it as nothing insofar as to describe it, that the level of violence or punishment that was executed did not match what the particular issue was. And these are all characteristics, competition, you understand? People wanting to outdo each other. Yeah, these are characteristics of, say, immaturity. And it's down to, children, or the simian mind is down to how they were constructed. And at this higher level, it's the manifestation of that into the physical. So this emphasis, as I say, on myth, etc., which you see, as I say, some of the most dominant programs in the media, what's most popular, you understand, the Star Wars, the Star Treks, Game of Thrones, all these different types of things, yeah, which are highly popular. As I say, it's all the manifestation of this kind of nature, or the emphasis even on Marvel and the superheroes, in terms of the biggest grossing movies and that. It's all, as I say, the manifestation of these types of superior forces. Does it mean don't watch them or don't engage? No, it doesn't necessarily mean that, but you need to understand where it's coming from. You understand? And the nature of why things the way they are. You understand? Looking at the cause that caused the cause and effect, by looking at the origin and the nature of their God, you understand, who are nothing more than extraterrestrials. Now we see from our side, the Muntharu or Murzaku, you understand, the Riskians, and you see from our side those influencing factors also in terms of our nature and influencing the original races on the planet here. But importantly, we see the presence of the soul force there, you understand, as the link to the original, as I say, creators. Now, you see a different type of nature there related to Nupu, and you see that our spirituality here, importantly for us, pay attention, is ontology, facts, and confirmation. So our spirituality is based upon facts. It's not based on belief. It's based upon factual information, confirmation. Facts, understood, helps us also to come together mentally. Because when we're dealing with facts and everybody at least can agree or confirm that is factual, then they can be aligned mentally. Yeah. When we start dealing with belief, then anybody's got. The new thing now is where it's just my opinion. That's the new thing now. It's just my opinion. I can say what I want, but it's just my opinion. Then you have to be truthful. Don't have to be factual. Well, it's just my opinion, just how I feel about the situation. Well, how do we ever get to any kind of mental alignment if people are not accountable to a certain set of standards? Yeah, in the mathematical sense, if we said 2 times 2 is 4, we can agree on that if we understand the rules of maths. It's not up for debate. You understand? It's not a disputing thing, and so that means that we can then build unity off of that. You understand? Because that is common sense. Common sense is not making good decisions. It's when people or more than one person is seeing something or sensing something in the same way. You understand? So that is true for us, common sense. So alignment to facts gives us common sense because it allows us to see things a certain way, and therefore we can unify based off of that. Hence why in us coming back into who and what we are today, you understand, we have to have, or not have to have, but we seek to align ourselves with guidance, with Patriarch and certain ways of culture and living, so that we can agree that in order for us to maintain our unity, in order for us to strengthen our ability to produce not only supreme beings when it comes to producing children, but to aid our ascension journey, we need to do that in a way which is aids unity, do you understand, or common unity, and community. Yeah, in order to do that, you need common sense. Yeah, so hence we see that in that context of us coming together. Now, if you think about the females, naturally, just delving down a little piece as well into our nature, you can see that when women get into a room together, naturally, isn't it, you will seek to unify, because the dominant female in the room, you understand, or what they might call the alpha male in the womb, the menstrual cycles will align with that most dominant female. So whether you like the woman, don't like the woman, etc., you're geared towards that. You understand? Unifying. Whereas the males, you understand, are more actually individualistic in nature. Understood? And so, so it's a man's world, because really we're going away from the common unity and more individualistic behavior, which is not how we lived tribally. You understand? If you think about analyzing part of Partak Yud, for example, that's going towards the fact that, hey, the way we're set up is not as individuals. That's not as our success. Our success. We are individuals, we accept that. But mentally, we're seeking to merge back and become part of a whole again. In the same part of all, not to focus on being part or separate parts, separate. In the same, as well as part, we know our part is whole, insofar as we expressed before, part and whole, for in the rules of things are one and the same for us. Hence why part, i.e., if a man donates his semen, which is part of him, you understand, but it's the whole of him as well, because in that small semen is all his DNA, etc., which is who he is. And the female, you understand, gives part of herself as the ovum. That is part. In order for it to be, the two things to be small enough to then be able to merge together to create a new life form. In the sense, so our ability to switch from whole and be part is part of the rules of things. Yeah, it's a skill, it's an ability, a talent that we've been enhoused with. Yeah, but we have to get back at least to the perception that we are whole, seeing ourselves as all, a part of existence. Yeah, because that's who our ancestors monitor, control, are part of. That's our origins. You understand? As opposed to this individualistic mindset and behavior. You understand? Which, say, has led to us, or people, let's say, being able to take advantage, understand, of our ignorant position, because our mind was dead. We wasn't thinking in our own mind. Yeah, we was thinking somebody else's mind. So when we look now at those two paths, importantly understood, we see our origin again following these lines, or at least that energy which was as energy before, it manifesting itself and being represented here on the planet in those guys. So if you think about, as I say, 9 ether as a gas, for example, as it slows down in vibration. If you think about 9 ether as a gas, or steam, I should say, it slows down in vibration, becomes water, it slows down again, it becomes ice. Yeah, so it's the same thing in different stages. So if you think about it as these gases slow down in vibration, yeah, they're manifested and still representing these forces in this context of the planet Earth. Understood? And so in our origin, you see, this science of Wu-Sabat, you see the science of Zupu, and the characteristics, understood, of the physical characteristics of what 9 ether represents, or what was first here when the planet, let's say, was new at its optimum, when it was optimized for humanoid life. The manifestation of that was, or the first beings, all now descended from the Sands people, was the characteristics that we see here, and small beings. Small beings. But here you see the interference in our genes by way of this Anunnaki named Inki, or Nudimud. We see there's a mixing in that's taken place there. So now we have some of the characteristics of the Anunnaki now in our DNA. Understood? So when we look now a little bit deeper, we see that the being then that was sent to us had characteristics from both, isn't it? To be able to deal with the nature of both sides of how our genes have been, obviously over millions of years, have been entangled. And so you need a combination from the two in order to deal with, as the genes tumble forward, to deal with our nature. You understand? So a reptile, obviously, who's also mammalian. You understand? So and then obviously in the last 400 years we see direct mixing in with the Caucasian. You understand? So within that, this is what we're battling against in terms of our progression or our ascension journey. There's some forces clearly that want to keep us here and keep us in a state of ignorance, as Zazaz and Zazatat, you understand, locked off from the real outformational forces, so that they can then take advantage and use us for their own purpose, versus us being children of the Natharu and following our ascension journey to be one with them again as their etheric descendants. Understood? Because, as I say, they cut off, let's get into that in so much detail, but they cut off the inherent link that we would have with them, understood, so that our adverse thoughts would not pollute those higher energy state environments, like 7 ether, 8 ether, and 9 ether states of existence. Now, when we look at these symbols, again, we can see, as we were showing you earlier, that the symbol here is going back to the past there, which also represented ether, and then the one that represents the male, which is future DNA, is obviously here is inversed. So one representing ether, one representing hair. Now I'm going to come back to that in one moment. I just want to show you something. So here for us, although here it's shown as negative fire at this higher level, when we think about it in us as a whole being, remember, it's showing the fact that, okay, well, we have a etheric esoteric side, isn't it? Which is I suppose arguably the real us. And then what does 6 represent for us? Well, if we're talking about us and human beings, then it represents our physical body, doesn't it? So 9 representing mental power, 6 or sex representing physical power. Understood? So in its inverse, that represented ether, but then here in its physical, it represents our hair. Our hair is still what? It's like an antenna, isn't it? To draw in, understood, that etheric power, understood, or us to be able to receive that information and process it accordingly at the appropriate intensity and frequency. Understood? So, but here it's locked off. Now, because we're both, clearly, we have the ability, isn't it, to raise our vibrational rate to break that lock. Hence the importance of Ptah as the opener. You understand? And at one time, even though we were in the physical, yes, as Tahites or Ptahites, yeah, we were open. We were connected to our higher ancestors. Hence, you understand, the word telepathy is saying what? Tell, path, or Ptah, a story, isn't it? You think about the phonetics of the word. You understand? Yeah? Tell, path, a story. Telepathy. So whilst we were in the physical, in our optimum state, we were open. We were aligned, you understand, with our ancestors, but not with the interference that can come with being open. So now, where the frequencies are scattered, air polluted, so on and so forth, there are influencing factors that can interfere with the live stream, as it were, or the 9 stream. You understand? Where we were aligned with our ancestors, now there are forces, even in our own genetics, that can interfere with that stream. Or if we're open, we can be subject to lower forces if we're not maintaining the right vibrational standards. And hence what we taught, or the actual fact, reflection and projection is about that. And how we can be influenced adversely, and if we're not protected. So yes, read with an open mind, but yeah, we need to guard that openness. And so this is the challenge that we face, isn't it? Yeah, in ensuring, at least by using the tools at our disposal, yes, in terms of the questions and so on and so forth, yeah, to make sure that what we're receiving is in actuality actual facts. And this is why verse 77 of ultimate reality becomes quite critical there. Yeah, so saying inspiration, revelation are attributes and results that accompany reasoning, but yet they must always be checked out completely and thoroughly to confirm them being hakat al-hakakat, actual facts confirmed, not beliefs or conjectures, fictions, fables, myths, and so on and so forth. Do you understand? Yeah. And legends, as religions put forth in the Bible and Quran, fiction stories, even creatures of fictions, must be confirmed by sound right reasoning for authenticity and reasonability. That is to see that they are indeed true and make sense. Truth is truth, Musbatu Sabians. So just because a person receives something in their head doesn't mean it's factual. People can receive information. You still have to run it through your own test to check it out. It's just a consequence of us being in the physical world as it is right now, and certainly having been under the spell. So you can see, I think it's taken from the proof, you can see here showing the state of the planet right now with Project 24, in the sense of the sun, moon, and the star representing Sirius there. And you see that these 9 rays seeking to penetrate the environment, you understand, to aid the transformation of us here, or the Ptahites, you understand, descendants of those evolutionary tasks I'm referred to as, yeah, to aid us our transformation. But that these forces here, yeah, are there to block, in terms of to block that energy, yeah, so that so 6 ether, or the forces that decay, can dominate. We can be used by them, you understand, like a parasite uses its host in order for it to survive. You understand? And so this is what it's telling you here, that these secret societies are what? Which is the eclipse of the sun of righteousness. Yeah, the eclipse obviously for temporarily appears to block out, yeah, the light of the sun, because the moon, as I say, gets in between the way of the sun and the earth. Now it's only, as I say, a temporary situation in that particular moment, and actually it doesn't block the light of the sun, it just blocks the certain aspects of the spectrum where it appears to go dark for a moment, because of the way the sun's revolving around, as you can appreciate. You understand? However, if we believe that to be the case, like we did with the dead mummy, then we will be locked off, isn't it, from our that true external energy, outformation energy, that is being sent to us to aid in our growth. And hence why you see now, in an ignorant state, like for example, when we get on holiday, for example, people are now buying sun cream and say, hey, even black people, you got to have fat to this and fat to that. Well, hold on a minute. There's people being born in the Caribbean, you understand? People being born in Africa, no drop of sun cream needed. But in the West, in England, they're telling you, hey, make sure you get, even black people have to get fat to this. Where if you train your body to do that, maybe then it's going to need it. But that's not in its optimum state. So this society will never teach you, because they want you to inherit the same fate as them, which is death, essentially, or decay or destruction, not the ability to live on. So it's important that you understand these mechanics, so to speak, and the structures in the way these systems are saying work, and how things are the way they are. Now, we have to embrace both sides of it to understand it, because we understand what's in our true nature in that regard. But we must stop in our own mentally. We must take control of the lock. Take control of that lock again, and lock off at the access of feeding the forces. So when we want to put the lock on, you understand, by not giving our energy to things that work against us, then we can use the lock to lock off our ability to feed the negative forces, isn't it? Yeah, so we take control of the lock again, because we have mind. Mind can override one's nature. Understood? Yeah, so we can lock off access, yeah, because we're alchemists. So use alchemy to lock off access that feed those six ether forces. Understood? And maintain rule over the physical by making or maintaining, or bring, at least giving the ability to realign itself to do what it's naturally supposed to do. You understand? Which it will protect. It will work with us. Understood? However, we, through bad information in this society, oftentimes have trained the body to rely on self-destructive behaviors as opposed to self-preserving behaviors. Not all, but a lot of us have fallen into that particular trap. So past, present, and future, going back to this, is important to us, because if you look at it, yeah, us going back, yeah, or in that direction, or the etheric direction, going anti-clockwise, is going back to the past, because we're going back to the origins where we were at our very best. Understood? To bring that forward now into the present, so we can take control of our future once again. You understand? So you're getting a better understanding of how these symbols, they're not always absolute, but how they're shaped and how they're shown is particularly important. And you see here in their higher aspects of them, yes, they represent the higher, or the esoteric, or the soul aspect of us. You reverse them, then it's dealing more with the physical aspect of us. Yeah, all part of who we are. And female, importantly, is past. What have they locked you off from? We mentioned this last week. They took away the woman from the center of the so-called, as they call it, zodiac. You understand? Or, but in our case, the Dendora star map. They removed her from the center of the zodiac. They made it so that basically you don't pay attention, or we as a people do not pay attention to our past DNA. You understand? I.e. tracking who our 30 ancestors are, to get a better understanding of who we are today. You understand? We jump over to mythological, well, in a couple of cases, mythological characters. In one case, the person did exist, that actually have got no relevance to us if we're not paying attention to everybody else in between. You understand? And so they removed, in our ignorance, in that mummy, in that dead mind state, we wasn't even interested in our past. Only interested in mimicking Caucasians or Arabs in these or Jews in these monotheistic religions. We're playing Jew, we're playing Muslim, We're playing Christian. Yeah, and not be at the expense of self. Yeah, so this is showing you, okay, cool. This is taking us back to that soul force. Us, you understand, traveling back symbolically, you understand, back into, by removing or reanalyzing these layers, getting back into the essence of who we are, living by the soul once again, by just simply restoring those connections. It doesn't mean removing the physical body. What it means is, hey, we need to restore those connections once again. You understand? And so understanding that past DNA, or those ancestors, and connecting back with them again makes us fully centered. You understand? Because you can't reverse in this context. You can't reverse time insofar as you can't be a child again in that regard. But what you are doing is you're traveling back into the past of you, or connecting with it, so that now there's a hookup. You're not living just in one appeared aspect of time. You're making the current then of the present, the future then, saying you're making it all one as now by reconnecting with the past. So you can take control of the future once again. So the importance of us connecting back with our ancestors is restoring back our female lineage, which then restores back or provides access to the esoteric lineage and power and forces by connecting us back to the mental again. You understand? And that opens up the lock through Ptah. So the name of the being, as I say, has a very specific meaning and particular purpose in what is required to do, which is why they sought, as they've done with all of our leaders, kill, assassinate, but in this day and time they assassinate the character and keep the individual locked away from his people, because they know, as I say, obviously the touch or the connection with us is important in aiding transformation. You understand? In getting us to be open once again. You understand? Whether that's through ritualistically, or, as I say, through the access of, in certain instances, touch, so that basically certain types of children, those golden children, can understand, okay, how can I differentiate between the forces within the environment, and move between the different ranges, all simply for the purpose, as we said, of restoring back our ancestral forces with the planes that are aligned with their family genetics, which is always 7, 8, and 9 ether forces, no lower. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1, and obviously into those other lower forces are always going to be not of our ancestry. You understand? And so Rayay Hara Achet is that program which is designed to realign those forces where they are supposed to be with their ancestral origins. You understand? Not to be used as battery, for adverse entities. Any questions?
No questions as yet.
Right. I'll come in. There is a question in the chat from Valerie. And Valerie asked, first she says, Raubat, thanks for the class. The secret societies listed included the Alabama or the Alhambra. I would like further explanation on this, as my knowledge stops at the Moorish building in Almeria, but was unaware of a secret society aspect. Thank you.
Okay, what I may do is I may do a separate thing on these to go through them in detail. Maybe I'll do a revisit on Luciferian conspiracy to go through these in more detail. So Alhambra, I argue, would be a secret society connected with the Islamic degree or tradition. Now, some of these terminologies here that you're seeing, you understand, is more to do with how they've been infiltrated and used now. You understand? Some of these, well, obviously a bit obvious that they're adverse, but some of the terminology here being used have been infiltrated, by other orders like the Illuminati, etc., for the one world order agenda. And so, yeah, we need to actually do a deep dive, which I haven't got time really to go into today, to go into these. So what I suggest is, because it's in bold here, you can go and look it up and find out some information. And then what we'll do is that we'll do a session where we show you the positive and negative aspects of some of these, not all of these. Some of these are Celtic, fully 100% Celtic, but some of these, for example, yeah, they are direct copies of, you understand, orders that we had back in the day. So they mimic them in a way, as I say, to block out our ability, as I say, to reconnect with, ultimately, with our Natharu, and more importantly, maybe some of our abilities, innate abilities that need developing, and how we used to use orders in order to help us to do that, whether we were female or male, at a certain point sectioned off to learn certain things and then come back together at a later point, to develop our full faculties internally. So Alhambra is, as I say, connected to some of the more esoteric side of the Islamic degree. But ultimately, I think, as we said before, even when you're doing with a term like Illuminati, for example, as we expressed before, the original Illuminati is us. Yeah, we are the original illuminated ones, because we took energy from the sun, in the sun, which illuminated us. We were able to receive and process light energy, as they would call it. You understand? So for that, we were illuminated. You understand? So we are the original Illuminati. Can you see? But if I said the term Illuminati, it would invoke a negative context. Yeah, and this is why we were saying before, the way they've used, and the reason why we use the term, or he's used the term eclipse, is because it mimics, the shape of the sun, doesn't it? But it's not the sun. Do you understand? It mimics the shape. And so it can appear to look one way, but in actuality, it's something else. You understand? Or it doesn't have the same characteristics, let's say, or eternal nature and intent, which is more important. You understand? One is a blocking factor, one is promoting growth. You understand? So hence why, as I say, if you think about your universities, which is really universities where you learn about the universe, who supports the university, they're called, or past students are called alumni, which ties into that word Illuminati. So you can see in ours, so we strip it back to its original, yes, it's to do with our stuff, and it would have a more positive and ether frequency to it, as opposed to what it's become after it's been tampered with, going away from the original, and it ends up to what we have today. But sometimes the purpose of walking through and studying them in some details, so we can see how some of our symbols have been misused. So you don't have a situation in your mind where, okay, because the society has trained you that a symbol's evil, for example, you automatically assume it is. And then when you see it appear now in, I don't know, your culture, in one of our books, for example, you think, but yeah, that's evil. Because some people look at the eye, for example, which you'll get into in a bit. They look at that as an evil symbol. Well, it is evil because it represents the sun. So if you don't have protection from the sun because you are melanin deficient, then you can see why your ancestors would have considered it evil, because the sun burned them and killed them. So they would see it as negative. Whereas somebody who was innately, through natural nature and their ancestors, born with supreme melanin, would embrace that symbol of the sun. So you got two sides, both who call themselves, or consider themselves to be human beings, who are the same symbol, what it represents, has a different frequency and meaning to how they perceive it. Do you understand? And so this is what they do. And interesting enough, when people look at the chimpanzee, yeah, it's one of its characteristics is its ability to mimic, isn't it? To copy. Yeah, and as we said in a previous class, in this society, yeah, they give the right to the copy, not to the originator. Yeah, we talk about copyright, not to the originator. You understand? Yeah. So, and as we gave that example before, you understand that people will go and take a picture of the pyramids in ancient Egypt, then put it on a website, and if you then take that picture and copy the picture from them, they're going to say, hey, you've breached the copyright. But who gives credit to the people who built the pyramids? How do they get a piece broken off? What, because you paid some a travel agent to go there and land there and take pictures? So who's giving that credit or compensation to those who built it? You understand? You see that aspect, the originator is removed. Yeah, hence why we're trying to make the point, the removal of the woman is the removal of the originator. You understand? So a long-winded answer to say we'll come back to the Alhambra, but so it's ties into the higher Islamic traditions or degrees. And so, and just finally, just to emphasize that point, each one of the different, if you look at the journey which you took, each one delivers, you look at the middle chamber, each one of the different religions has a higher aspect or entity to it. So when you're saying, excuse me, these secret societies, they have their origin in the root religions. You understand? The problem is the world doesn't really pay that much attention to this, what is being classified in our doctrine as the middle chamber. So these higher or esoteric aspects of these lesser mysteries. So Christianity's higher degree or more esoteric side is called Magiism. Yeah, Sufism ties into the Muhammad's higher degree, and then Kabbalism ties into the higher degrees of Mosism. So there's things taught here which will never be shared to the congregation in these lower degrees. You understand? And so therefore, the secret societies are basically versions or offshoots of this, and it all comes out of Sumerianism. And so Alhambra comes into this area on this side. So I say we'll probably do a class called Luciferian Conspiracy Revisited, and then we'll take you through and walk you through those in more detail. Okay, any other questions?
No more questions from me.
Okay, so we're making this point about and I suppose one of those aspects as well is the fact that those forces, those societies are prevalent to maybe ensure that 6 ether forces stay present, and then other orders are to ensure that 9 ether forces stay present. Do you understand? Or are around, or to rule and dominate, to make sure that the environment is promoting growth, liberty, and the protection of the planet itself, which is equally or probably most important, even more so than the people. You understand? Because of the amount of life forms it sustains. Now, what else do we want to cover here? Yeah, so just to show you again, symbolically here, Nupu is associated with the bee. Again, just in terms of us understanding different natures. Yeah, so the bee is symbolic of Nupu, which again works collectively together in a hive, and then Zupu is associated with the fly. Yeah, which again attracts decay, so on and so forth. Where this is promoting life. Understood? So again, does that mean that it's both negative? Well, no. If you look at our religious orders, our military orders back in the day, they had the bee showing and the fly on the same symbol, because the fly is difficult to kill, isn't it? You understand? Sometimes you'd be pulling your hair out, so to speak. Trying to swat a fly, so it's difficult to kill. So when we understand it here, we must understand both natures. You understand? We must accept the good and bad in things, or the positive and negative, because there's positive and negative in us. So we must accept both sides, but the 9 must dominate the 6. You understand? I.e., mental must dominate the physical. You understand? We must not live by the physical dominating the mental. You understand? So we're not living by our desires, or, you understand, in that way, being controlled by our animal nature. No, the mental must override that and control it. You understand? So as the alchemists, we utilize these forces for the best aim of what we need to get done and achieved. You understand? And so having knowledge of both means that we have control. We're never in a state of ignorance, to be something to sneak up behind us, and us to be surprised by something that we are not aware of. Yeah. So it's a important journey for us to understand, almost in that context. And as I say, it's important that you see here, say, why these symbols are shown the way they're shown. You understand? So once the mummy was resurrected back to life, then now it gives us an opportunity to transform, isn't it, from man and woman to become what? Supreme beings once again. Which is obviously the ultimate aim. And the science, or I said it in the other direction, but that's the science of Wu-Sabat, to transform information into outformation. So you are information, or we are information. Yeah? Because we've got outformational ancestors providing or transmitting energy into our informational present being. So the information can also be us, because we're in a certain formation and we need to be transformed back into the outformation of the 9 again, or to become 9 again, at 360 degrees physical, 360 degrees spiritual or etheric, to make us 720 again. You understand? So that's our transformational journey, which is what the and the Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn helps us at the end of this 24,000 year cycle to do. Okay, so let's get back to where we were. So I think we was in somewhere in here, and we were working through these rules around life after death. Excuse me, she's dealt with part in the book that we're dealing with here. So very, very quickly then, because I think we were a bit further in part 1, we were just showing you the fact that here we see Arashtat, or Isis, who they call Isis, mighty throne. You see the name there, and the fact that, very quickly, I've gone through this so many times before, but for new people maybe on the call haven't heard it, her name means throne. You see a throne there, 3 stages. If you look at the Safaf, it's a bit difficult to see. It's got 3 stages here, and that overlays, the riddle of the Sphinx, as you know, what has 4 legs in the morning, what has 2 legs at noon, what has 3 legs in the evening. So that ties into the fact of here with the 4 suns, that basically this represents life, living, and then when you die, you get to the point of lived, L-I-V-E-D. So life, living, lived. You're born, or conception, born into the world. Now you're in darkness, in your mother's womb, and then boom, you emerge into the world. We can see you now. You understand? So this is the emerging sun. Understood? So yes, you're on all 4s in the morning of life. You're then on 2 legs as you learn to walk upright. You understand? In the noon of life, and then old man or woman walking with a walking stick. You understand? You get 3 legs in the evening of life. So this basically got overlaid as a journey in light. But every morning when you wake up, you can overlay that against your day, isn't it? The Atun point, when you wake up, you're most energetic. You understand? This is the Atun point, and then when you retire to bed, you get to the Amun point, which is spent energies as spent energies as thought and sound. So when you, interesting enough, your day is done and you go to bed, say, well, sleep is assisted death, because here now I'm existing, or we are existing as a mental being, isn't it? So we're still alive, but we're not using our physical now, our skin suit to exist. We're existing now in our higher form. Do you understand? So this alludes to the life journey, but we understood that life was a burning, breathe in oxygen, you breathe out carbon dioxide, and so you are burning black, yeah. And when the breath expires, then one of your souls stops working, the Ruh soul, yeah, the one which is powered by the breath. And you breathe in oxygen, let's say out carbon dioxide, but it also has the name in there, Hu-He, you understand? So Hu-He, where they got the name Yahweh from, and we went through that, in a sense. So Hu, in a sense, is going external. He is coming internal, you understand? So that male and female link again, you understand? Hu-He. So we're seeing here that there's an existence. So you can't have life after death, because life is a burning process, you understand? But you can have existence after death, yeah, of us existing as energy. And so once the physical obviously is shut down, whether you are not the personality aspect of you, but whether a you remains after the point of death, denotes several things. So one, are the genes strong enough? And secondly, did you do the necessary things in life to strengthen that aspect of you in the physical to be strong enough to be born in the next level of existence? Yep. So when we look at our stories, as we were talking about earlier, yeah, remember, death is a disease. Yeah, so if you cured all disease, but you don't die from death, you die from a heart attack. You understand? You die from some disease. If you cured, potentially, if you cured all diseases, yes, and people weren't murdering and killing by accidents or whatever, you basically cure death if you can cure all diseases, yeah, which we're getting close to that point as predicted in Man from Planet Risk. Understood? So, however, your genes have an expiry in them, yes, where basically the cells are only going to regenerate a certain amount of times within a person's lifetime. You understand? And so the telomeres, which are at the end or tips of the chromosomes, they get shorter with each regeneration. So the body is constantly recycling itself. You understand? Excuse me. And so this is a kind of birth, life, death, resurrection is part of our existence in the physical. Do you understand? And when 6 ether forces came here, because prior to that, yes, this decline, as you would have it, wasn't as prevalent. At a certain point, it didn't exist, because obviously you look at things like the evergreen tree, it doesn't have this up down, yeah, declination. It stays evergreen. So that's showing you at a certain point we have become weaker with people of lower genetic strength mixing in with our genes, which has weakened us. But our fail safe in there to master this aspect of the journey as laid out for us by the Natharu was the ability for us to reincarnate, understood, multiple times over in order to master this particular plane of existence, understood. So yeah, we'll leave that one for the moment. So I think we covered this in part 1, if memory serves me correctly. So let's get on to where we were at before. So the point is that there are 9 aspects of you, but these 3 in particular, understood, these 3 in particular is what a person needs effectively to not necessarily just exist past the point of death, but to travel. So us to be able to travel interdimensionally to higher states of being, for example, and what separates us from other human beings on the planet is the fact that we have this. Yeah, so this soul, or the Ba'ah, is what enables us to have or ascend, yeah, to higher states of being. You understand? Different planes of existence, different dimensions, so on and so forth. This is what enables us to move past. So effectively, as we've expressed before, our ancestors see this state of existence as death, and when we die, we are truly then alive. So the darkness is where life is. Here is considered to be death, because when a person is born, they are destined to what? Die. Yeah, hence why you see in that Zaz symbol there, you see it's locked in with the forces of Zupu, because birth obviously means death. You understand? Because when you're born, you must die. But when we existed in that etheric state, there is no death, because energy cannot be destroyed. You understand? Only changed in polarity. Understood? Now, we were saying to you before previously about that name, isn't it? Amun Nabab Reye Akhtar, and now you see here the Safaf, yeah, tied in. So you can see, okay, when the Egyptians, or us as Kadem Mahmat, were describing and said, well, that being's Tahuti, understood? What we were doing was, okay, we're giving you a part of it. We're not going to give you all of the stuff. We give you a part of who he is. But you're living in the day and time now where all things are being, made plain, at least for us, to aid our transformation. Do you understand? And when we moved into the second half an hour, symbolic of 30 years, from the hereafter, then the rise of the female in 2012, which took us into the thereafter. We're getting it the full deal. You understand? Back again, or the full information. Yeah, so you can see, okay, but the true nature of Tahuti was that I'm on the Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn. Okay, well, they were just giving you part of it here and not whole. But now you have to get the 9 knowledge, the 9 mind, and where we were locked previously in the 3, that now has to be unlocked. Yeah, in order for you to enable your full transformation. Do you understand? So we explained to you last week about this term perfection, and then so what you're striving for, not only in this level of existence, but when you surpass this realm and you move on to higher realms, you're still seeking to attain that. You understand? So the definition here is being given to you. Yes, once the ka'ah separates from your bashar flesh, you will continue to progress until you attain tatmum, perfection of being, as well as body, becomes pure inside out and outside inward. A clean, pure akal mind, all your intentions, all your actions and your deeds are pure, without personal reason or gain. A shuk divine love will give you a state of chanan, grace. So in here, in Mother Circle of Existence, what you basically have to do to achieve or pass this particular plane is to basically do something other than for self and kind. So now it doesn't have to be as was described in the book. I don't know, you don't have to be a Nikola Tesla, for example. Do you understand? Who was a significant inventor of a number of different technologies on this planet, for example, and really made his mark, understood, in the world. But you do have to make your mark in a way which is other than for self. So doing something for the benefit of the environment or for others, for other than self and kind, some selflessness that you need to be aware of and known by. You understand? So But it doesn't necessarily have to be always something huge. Understand? But this is what a person in their life must strive for, which is, excuse me, interesting enough, in the Freemasonic orders, for example, both male and female, one of the things that is inherent about those is in us, in a positive way. So I'm talking about us, our orders. I'm not saying to say Euro Freemasons don't do that, but I'm talking about inherent in our orders is that selflessness. Do you understand? Is doing charitable works and things of that nature. So remember, those orders are designed to help you attain what? Tat Mum. Help you attain perfection of being. But some things, obviously, as we know, have to be kept sacred and secret. It's not for everybody's ear, because you don't know. Understand? All's intentions. You have to be tested and proven worthy. And these things have always existed in our culture, aligned with natural nature. So ultimately, you see that the fact that this is there, and the fact that, well, you have to be given up to 24,000 times to be able to achieve it, shows that at any point you can trip up, you understand, and break certain rules, which means, hey, you're going to have to go back and relearn. You understand? You haven't mastered all of the experiences necessary. So therefore, you have to be born again into the physical in order to balance out your being, so to speak, and master this plane. So if it's easy, then yeah, you wouldn't get as much lives or tries to have a go. Do you understand? Now, once you get to the end of those 24,000, the danger is, if you have not learned that, then you can basically expire. It can happen at any point, in fact, but you can expire, and the elements of you, your soul and other aspects of you, will just dissipate and just become part of existence. You understand? You won't have that ability as a being, yeah, to be able to grow, progress, so on and so forth, if you don't take these opportunities to perfect your being. Understood? Now, excuse me. Let's walk through some of the rules. I'm not going to cover all of them. So if you do or are interested in more details around the seek out class, or the book called Spiritual You After the Physical You Dies, and Mother Circle of Existence as well. It's got some aspects of that which we're covering today as well. So, taking a life. So you can see here in verse 30, it says, yet all a person does in each hayah life can and will haunt them. The very worst is to take another human's life for any reason, with no excuse. Verse 14. If a shakhas person, katul, kills or murders another life, be in the raham womb or after, that ka'ah spirit will be attached to them in this hayah life. So, I think, as we've expressed, there are rules within the environment. Like, as I say, if you do what's necessary to create fire, fire will be created. But there are other rules which govern the environment, which again cause consequences as a result of actions taken. You understand? So, and in some instances, as I say, because it's a reactive state, and this is what people maybe fail to understand, because it's a reactive state, there's no conscious judgment or decision making in that scenario and that situation. Do you understand? So as long as the rules of the environment are fulfilled, you're going to get a certain outcome. This is why, for example, just talking about sort of us as males and females coming together, you don't have to be in love to have a baby. You don't have to be married to have a baby. Do you understand? Even in some horrific instances, a person can be raped and a baby still be produced. Do you understand? Because the rules are there to progress life, govern the environment, so on and so forth. And there's no judgment in it. It's a reactive state of rules. But there are rules in there which, as I say, human beings are not always aware of. So just because man may say it's legal to do, doesn't mean that's consequence free. So, yeah, you can smoke a cigarette just because they say, well, it's legal to do. That doesn't mean that, you know, it's not going to kill you. Do you understand? Because those rules are the rules. So man can say what they want, but that doesn't mean to say that nature is aligned with what man says. And oftentimes what you find is that their laws oftentimes are anti-nature, where what we sought to do when our society was at its highest was make sure that our rules and our conduct within society was aligned with natural nature. If there were likely to be adverse results as a consequence of certain actions, then the thing is to minimize those, to as least as possible, and maximize the benefits of a certain situation. So I think we talked about the sexual process, for example, as one where, for much pain much pleasure you must experience the equal amount of pain, and so therefore it's in a situation you want to maximize maximum pleasure for the least adverse results. You understand? So here you see the rules of taking a life are significant. You understand? In that regard. So if you're a soldier doing your job and you're defending, you kill somebody, the consequence of that is that the person's spirit is attached to you up until the point of death, and it can have a lot of different consequences. I think there's a film, the Master Teacher reference, we need to watch. It was called American Sniper. I think, American Sniper was the movie. Obviously, this individual for his country killed a significant number of people. You understand? Him doing his duty. But remember, each person that he killed, the spirit was attached to this individual. And obviously, if a person's been killed in adverse causes, they're angry, aren't they? They want revenge. So within that person's life, those spirits are seeking to influence, you understand, that person in the physical. And so you see people being driven to drink, drugs, you understand, different things of that nature. They're getting disturbed in their dreams, etc., because those in this context, they're seeking to kill him for what the person did to them, and when you get onto the other side now, well, we can deal with you there as well. So that's what we're seeing. In the context of this movie, if you go to when you watch the end of the movie, what Bob was saying was that there was so much anger towards this individual, they eventually, collectively got the result that they were looking for. Do you understand? They forced that result from that side. So what maybe the youth, in terms of some of the youth violence we're seeing, the things that they don't realize that these things kick in. No one talks about that side of it. All this, I bust my gun and all this kind of stuff, or whatever the case may be, and seemingly on the bravado side of it, don't realize that it carries consequences, serious consequences, to the point where, if you remember in the old school books, you read that if one of these Ifrit beings, Anunnaki or whatever they would call it, I think Anunnaki, they used the term that time, but an Ifrit being, like a risky, and presented themselves in front of you, and you pointed a gun at them, it said the being would rather let you shoot them and kill them rather than kill you and get trapped in this cycle of consequence of taking a life. Because it not only then you sometimes have to experience then how the person was killed, you may have to be reborn in every person's life or type of life where you experience what the impact was of the life that you took. You understand? So I'd be being born back in as a mother who has a son who got killed, being born in a father, do you understand? Being back in as all the relatives, you understand, who were impacted, etc. So you're going to relive all these different experiences, so you see the impact of, you understand, what the consequence was of taking that life. You understand? So both in this world and in the one after, it has an impact and effect. Do you understand what I'm saying? So hence I sought to avoid it, and even there were certain rituals excuse me, that would aid soldiers in battle to at least try and remove these spirits that were attached to them because of that point of, as I say, them seeking to try and end the person's life or cause them to commit suicide or whatever the case may be as a result of that life being taken. Now, so maybe controversially, because this Roe versus Wade ruled in the States, which has got nothing to do with this, by the way, but the rules about abortion. So the real consequence of this is that, again, just because we say, I say we, but the society says it's legal, doesn't mean there's not consequences. So you have to kind of understand that as well. Now, if you abort a healthy child, excuse me, then it's still considered to be death or murder. Now, look, in this society, certainly us who have lived in ignorance, maybe for a lot of our lives, didn't have access to this right knowledge, right information, etc., we've made a lot of errors and mistakes and continue to make errors and mistakes. And so that's why these cycles are necessary. You understand? In that regard. So the issue is that I think in the context of maybe all this Roe versus Wade or whatever, is the fact that, as I say, it's the woman's body and so they're free to do what they want, so on and so forth. Now, in the context of these rules that we're talking about, these nature's rules, both the man and the woman are responsible for the outcome. So if you might say, let's say, I don't know, the woman or the partner, whatever, aborts the child and that was her decision, you understand? It doesn't matter whether it's her decision, etc. or not. Both male and female inherit the fate of the consequence, you understand? Because they were both involved in the creation of the child. Now, society has made us feel like, which is, you know, if you don't have enough money to raise a child, then there's going to be pressure on you to abort, you understand? And many of us have been in situations, or whatever the case may be, where we may have arrived at those decisions, whether we agreed with it, one partner agreed, one didn't, do you understand? Or whatever the case may be. The result is that it leads to the consequence of a child being murdered. Now, from a perception point of view, the issue is that, because people say, well, that's because their argument was that wasn't life. Well, you think about it from a perception point of view. If you want the child, then when conception is achieved, you do see that as life. If you don't want the child, or the child's inconvenient, then it's easy then to accept a definition where it's not life, because, yeah, that makes you feel a bit better about the action that you're participating within. But particularly the women involved, you understand, will understand, if they've ever been through that situation, that it definitely is life. You understand? Because it has a psychological impact on the person. And society's kind of messed up in a way, because it doesn't, in not accepting that as the outcome for what it is, there's not a lot of services or counselling and different things that would maybe go along with that type of decision making. Now, clearly we see here that the child is attached then to the person, you understand? Attached to the person, or both the couple. And let's work through what happens. So if a couple bought a nechebi, charad, healthy child, so there are some circumstances where, not saying those rules don't kick in, but you have to consider that actually abortion may be appropriate, and then deal with the consequences as a result. Because you don't want to necessarily, just because you're protecting yourself from one set of rules, create a scenario which creates a horrible existence for a child in the physical, because you're seeking to avoid one set of rules. Now, is it complicated? Yes, it's not black and white as maybe be described. But for example, if a child was severely disabled, yes, and not really, because of technology, whatever, not able to live effectively in the physical world, then that would be one reason why you might terminate that child. Rape Maybe another reason why you will terminate a child and then deal with the consequences post that. You understand? So it's very clear about healthy child. You understand? So we need to read into that appropriately. So say for whatever reason, yeah. So they Talmud create that child's ka'as spirit, hayat lives. Excuse me. That child's spirit, hayat lives on around them, or can come into another harad child they have later, or just stay around until they pass over from this khata'al, physical life, with no anger or danut, judgment. Yet both parents will have to live another life and will experience the very same as the child spirit, a life of rejections. So as you can see here, and this is important to say, so in this context, separate to murdering another human being, you understand, if you abort a child, the child, basically will stay with you, and even though in fact it's supposed to act almost in a sense of almost a guide in one's life. The child can come through, as it's saying here, later through another child, you understand, but it means that you automatically in that context have to do another cycle within one of your 24,000 cycles. Yeah, so your ability to ascend without doing another round is compromised. Do you understand? But as it says here, no judgment in that regard, but you're going to have to experience in this next life what it means to be rejected. You understand? Now, there is, I wouldn't say a way around it, but I'm going to come on to another bit a bit later. In fact, let's follow that up actually. So if there are some situations, however, that basically if you showed appropriate remorse for your decision, or that decision which you both took, you understand, if you showed appropriate remorse, the assigned ascending master to you, which governs whether you ascend or descend, in a sense, you have ascending and descending masters assigned to you, can override that decision if the person showed the relevant amount of remorse for that situation or whatever, in the context of what we consider to be what we call abortion. You understand? So it can be overridden, but it's not a guarantee. The natural consequence is that you have to go back and live and experience another life. Now, you got to realize is that all this state of perfection and us getting to higher states of existence is because when you think about the type of entities that help us now to govern existence and have the relevant amount of intelligence that we're looking at. If we think about the sun and contemplate its existence for the moment, it does its job regardless. You understand? It does its job regardless of whether we acknowledge it, whether we do not. So if we think about higher life forms, well, the Natharu are our suns. If you think about our sun, you understand, 93 million miles away. You think about its decisions that it has to take. It birthed us, gave birth to the planets, gave birth to environments, and it has to do its job until, it doesn't exist anymore. It can't go off and do what it wants to do. It doesn't have the option. It does have the option, but it chooses not to. It must maintain the solar system. If you think about how many trillions of life forms, even in our solar system, are relying on what the sun does, then you understand, you don't get to live a life that you want to live. You live life which you've dedicated in service to others. So all of this in this context, you can see, excuse me, that as children of the Natharu, ultimately that's the life in what your direction, the direction that your life is going to. If you choose to go that way, you obviously have the option to be much more individualistic, you understand, but you won't progress to higher states of existence, you understand, and eventually your ability to live onward will be removed. Understood? Yeah. So it's about everything. It's about us learning. Yeah, not going to some hell and sitting, being burned to a crisp, according to that lift, if you don't do what God says to do. No, it's about experiences. Yeah, and us gaining and learning from those experiences, doing better, whether positive, negative, you understand, in that regard. Yeah. Now, so verse 21 says, whatever you do to harm a person or persons in life will be your fate in another life you will live. So we understand that. Yeah. So what you do now, it can affect lives going forward. You understand? And in some instances, why even in this existence, some people have easier lives than others, because fate, you understand, plays a part in decisions taken in the past by the individual soul of that person coming back around again. But if you also think about it, that also carries over into your genes, doesn't it? So how you live today will affect the way your children live, isn't it? Yeah, insofar as your physical genes that you donate over to your child. So if we, for example, I don't know, continue to eat sweet things or whatever, and then end up with diabetes, we're going to pass, and then we have a child in that state, then we're going to pass that on to our child, isn't it? And so not diabetes if it's not an inherent disease, but the taste for the foods that lead to diabetes, we're going to pass that on to our children. Understand? So if you think about the physical rules of this, do you understand? Well, the esoteric rules are exactly the same. Do you understand in that regard? Yeah. So 22. If a life is cut off by accident before its physical time, according to its rebirth of cells by telomeres, we talked about it earlier, that a person may share a new child's body up to the age of 9. Some stay on around the person longer if granted the right to be a spirit guide. So imagine you're in not imagine, but some people in a car accident, yeah, their life is taken before the time that the telomeres were set to expire. Yeah, so your time's taken prematurely. 1 second, let me just close this window. 1 second. Yeah. So what happens now? As it's expressing here, you get permission to in-house another child, obviously in your bloodline or whatever, and so that you share the life, you share that life stream with that child. You understand? But you have to leave at 9 years old, obviously, unless you get permission to stay, but then you now become that guide. Now, as we was explaining, I think it was explained it, but this diagram shows it in more detail. This whole thing about this transgender debate, you understand? And the reason why, one of the reasons why you do not or would not change a child who was in that situation early, excuse me, is because of this reason. So a male child might be born, for example, but in this context, in this consequence, a female spirit might now scent and enjoy in this child's existence, or use this child of existence to balance out what they lost by way of this accident. Do you understand? And so basically at the 9th week, where gender is basically determined, yeah, between, or up to, I think this to week 6, understood? But in this process there, that host can in-house the person. Now, if the person's male spirit is not strong enough, i.e. that male dominance or male personality, and the female spirit that's in-housed it as a result of the accident is more dominant, then it's going to cause gender confusion in the child when they're born. The reason why you wait is because in this context, you understand, and if this scenario is why it's happened, is because the female spirit, let's say for example, that was dominating, yes, will then leave that child at age 9, and they revert back to those dominant male characteristics that they was originally born with. So in this context, you can have shared existences, yeah, because we are a soul, but as I say, like you think about your physical body, you have different life forms in housing you right now, you understand, which coexist, you understand? And even in the Sacred Wisdom of Tahuti, we mentioned this before, the master explains that your solar plexus is a solar system that has different, you understand, planets and different things. You're housing other beings' existence, just on a smaller macro scale within your universe as you. Yeah, so this idea that we're in this life and that you haven't got life forms that share our life because we're around and we exist, do you understand? Is something that we need to disavow and get used to, because it's just part of what we are. There's a number of symbiotic life forms that exist and coexist as a fact that we're here and we're born, so on and so forth. So this is not always the reason for transgender. Remember, we explained this before very quickly. I'll go over it. Remember, if a woman while she's pregnant is stressed within the pregnancy, this is why it's important. This is what can cause, as I say, the gender to be thrown off. Yeah, where you basically have males being born, understood, who are male physically, but they have a female spirit. Yeah, because the hormones in the person are feeding information to the person that they are female. You understand? So, but they're physically male. So, and this can happen as a result of stress during the pregnancy. Why it's important, yeah, to help make sure that females are centered, they're comfortable within the environment, you understand, that they're in, yeah, because it can lead to a consequence of gender confusion, you understand, when the child's born. So that's one of the ways how you get, you know, gays or lesbians, etc., and then various different things on the scale of that to degree. So a transgender person, for example, if not this context, do you understand, it would be an extreme of, yes, of the same incident which is taking place. So if a male, as I say, person who's male, stressed during the pregnancy, messes up the hormones are feeding back to the individual, you're female, understand, internally. The internal female, understood, is attracted to the external male form, even though they are in a physical body of a male. Hence why you get two males together. Do you understand? Yeah, so it's still male to female. It's not male to male. Internal female feels like a female, attracted to the external male form, hence you end up with a same-sex situation. Do you understand? The extreme of that would be that those hormones are firing off information to make the person feel so female in that example that actually I don't even want to be in this body, doesn't feel like it's mine. Yeah, because the hormones are firing off the wrong information. So in that regard, now that's very different to being a hermaphrodite and hermaphrodite, who basically have the energy of both genders inside of them. Do you understand? So but still will be dominant, hermaphrodite dominant on female, hermaphrodite dominant on the male side, but they are both genders inside the same person. Understood? And may not find, because of the lack of understanding in this society to date, because of religious ignorance, not find their place, and might find themselves in certain settings, basically, because no one really explained who they are, how it came about, etc., and then what those feelings are. So if you end up in, I don't know, London, Soho, you're going to be influenced a certain way because you don't know who you are. So you're going to align yourself with where you feel people are open-minded. You might end up in a situation, but that's not really your nature. You understand? So this is why it's important for us in this day and time to be able to override that with the right knowledge, and then create environments where, okay, we can teach the children or recognize this and then deal with it appropriately. Do you understand? Not suppressing anything, but you understand? Okay, because society makes you feel that you're this, then that's why you might end up in that direction, rather than actually you're this. So yeah, you might be attracted to females, but you're male. You understand? Insofar as being a hermaphrodite. So if you want to have whatever sexual relations, then you want to produce children, then you're going to have to go with your opposite sex, not who you feel you're attracted to in that regard. You understand? But again, you know, what the emphasis that people think that these higher, our ancestors place on this is a lot less important than we think it is. Do you understand? Because that's religious ignorance is not necessarily how we dealt with things back in ancient times. Now, all of this is to say that the society is optimized in a way that produces star children. You understand? So that's the way the society was then optimized, and then us going forward into the future, that is what we want to create. It's an optimized to create supreme beings. They're star children. So anything that would be contra to that, then obviously that's not optimum. So you'd base your society around optimizing situations. But if situations happen, as is always the case, you know, birth is a precarious thing at times, then you just deal with it as and when it happens, understood? So we would never ostracize somebody for their sexual orientation, understood? Because whether it's optimum or whether it's suboptimum, the person's still a person, do you understand? And it's still part of nature, in the same way maybe some people are born with bad eyesight and things of that nature. You have to deal with it, and to your level of technology will be how the thing will be dealt with. So if you can correct, for example, we had a safe way of correcting or perceiving a person will be born with bad eyesight, and you were happy for the doctor or whatever to apply the solution pre-birth, then you're going to do that. If you're not happy for the doctor to apply it pre-birth because it's too risky, then you're going to have a child that's born with bad eyesight. You understand? In a similar sense here, if you know if technology was at a state where it could detect that hormonal imbalance, do you understand, between week 6 and 9, then you'd have a decision to make, isn't it? Not from religious influence, but from what's best for the baby. Do you understand? And so, do I want the child to be born in a situation where they're in the wrong body, you understand, but hormonally think they're at the other sex? Then if there's an option to correct that, you may correct that hormonal imbalance at that time. So it's always based on the equality journey, if you want to call it that. It's always based on your technological abilities, isn't it, as a people. Now we've reached a point where, if you think about it, people used to be ridiculed for wearing glasses, for example. Now it's seen as something that denotes intelligence, whether it is or not, but it's associated with more intelligence. That's the right thinking around that. I'm not sure, but it's obviously wrong, got nothing to do with your intelligence when you wear glasses, but that's what it's associated with. We've reached a point now technologically where what was considered to be a defect, which it is a defect, a physical defect, can be corrected technologically now. You understand? Because people have surgery, and that removes the need for them to wear glasses in certain instances. So the ultimate, in that context, the ultimate equality journey for that is to get rid of the defect. Do you understand? But in some situations, as we described here, this is as a consequence of just natural liberty. You understand? So this is one of the things that, why, as I say, in spiritual ignorance, is dangerous, because us not knowing what's taking place. Imagine somebody now reacting off of the child's expressions, and then, do you see what I'm saying? Committed surgery or whatever before the age of, committed to doing surgery or something before the age of 9. Do you understand? So this is where the ignorance really becomes a problem, because actually it's just going to correct itself, if that's the right word to use, because the in-housing spirit is going to leave by age 9. Do you understand? And the child will then become or appear singular sex again. Do you understand? Having had those feelings in those early stages. So it's important for us to be able to recognize that. And this is why your mind, since certainly the Right Knowledge series, as we have veered away from those monotheistic rich teachings, which got nothing to do with sexuality, it's got to do with the production of food. You understand? Has, let's say, informed a certain way of thinking, which for our purposes we have to move away from. As we've explained before, those hermaphrodites and hermaphrodites are necessary to open up gateways. You understand? And so they vibrate over and above the normal human being. You understand? And so they were necessary in ancient times to open up gateways. Yeah. So again, you can see why certain indoctrination would want to keep them or keep us in a situation where they're not free to come out, because someone doesn't want the gateway opening, which connects us to our ancestors. And the LGBTQIA community in this day and time is simply being used for population control, you understand, by those sacred societies. So that's why you see it so prevalent now, for that reason alone. But obviously, interesting enough, this recent situation with by trying to curb abortions is, again, as some have already intimated, well, maybe they perceive, not the extraterrestrial side, but the terrestrial beings perceive, hey, we're being wiped out here, in the same, we're due to end because our ancestors pre-programmed it in our genes, and so we're trying to keep our existence here and alive. So maybe they're reversing it in that regard. Either way, for us, not to be too preachy about it, you can see the importance of us controlling our sexual power, because those rules kick in. If you want to avoid the consequences of those rules, then males need to, because we've turned it into a male versus female argument. Do you understand? Well, males have to learn to subdue their passions and control their desires, because women don't get pregnant by themselves unless they're a hermaphrodite. You understand? So she got pregnant somehow. So therefore, men have to learn to control their sexual desires. You understand? And not become a dumping ground for our lustful behaviors in females, which leads to then women getting pregnant. If we then terminate those children, do you understand? Not only is those consequences kicking in, but it can make it more difficult for the woman to get pregnant again. Do you understand? So we have to think above our individual self and think more about the race, and also about the care of the woman, us as males, not only in this life, but the next one. Do you understand? So to avoid these situations, you either have to be, strapped up, as you say, or your pull-out game needs to be strong. And at the same time, women need to be careful about the partners that they pick, you understand, because of consequences that they get left with. You understand? So in this free, do what you want, you understand, no judgment society that they are, promoting and throwing around, where there are consequences. Do you understand? And so we need to be cognizant of the power that we're armed with, on both sides of this. 9 mental, 6 physical, you understand? And even the master expressed many, in 9 Ball and the Right Knowledge series, about the fact that, look, when you're on the come up, as we are, seeking to come out of our adverse situation, for example, we basically, having children is a burden. And sex can be a burden. So if we create situations that put more upon us to carry, then it's going to affect our ability, as I say, to ascend or raise. If we're not having children in controlled ways, and optimum ways where we can manage the responsibilities that come with that. You understand? Because getting rid of the convenience of it through abortion also carries consequences. You understand? Which, as I say, you'd rather not have to endure than endure. Any questions?
Yes. there's a question from Anonymous. It says, what if you had an abortion and eventually had a child?
So it could be a case that the aborted child has come through. Excuse me, the aborted child has come through that line again, and so that may balance out the situation. So it may be the point that because you still did the act, understood, then that consequence may sit there still. You understand? But it may be that because the adverse consequence has not happened, then at the point where a decision was to be made, the ascending master would have to rule on that scenario. Do you understand? Because in that sense, the consequence of the decision has not been realized because the child eventually came through. But because you did execute it, then there's some learning that needs to be resolved by that to know what it feels like to deliver that type of rejection. So it's likely a consequence where the ascending master would have to make a decision in that regard. Any other questions?
Yes, I do have a question. Oh, I do have a question. It's from Dermot, and I think when you was earlier on when we were talking about the stuff of and breaking down the hieroglyphs, he's asked this question. It's put Rabat Zamal, hope all is well. How does Miss Batia Harafat tie in with the hieroglyphs on the pyramids, etc.? Are they the same?
Rabat. So there's two different things, I suppose. Remember when you're talking about the Safaf, so we have different types of our script, isn't it, and language, yeah. So the Safaf is one type of script. Do you understand? So when you speak about Miss Batia or the way we're conversing, that enables us to communicate with each other on a day-to-day. Excuse me. But the symbols, these hieroglyphs, is another language, still works with similar principles to the letters that we use every day, but enables us to use them in a way where it basically alludes to the world that we don't see. So the way of us using symbols is that is a visible symbol, but it alludes to something that you can't see. So if you think about it, most of our perception is that we're in this light existence, but actually existence is made up of what we can't see, i.e. dark matter and dark energy. So symbols is a way to communicate that which we don't see, and it alludes to, you understand, life or existence as we see it at the moment, to contemplate and reason what is taking place in the darkness. Understood? So they're two different ways. They're both languages. It's just one is just a way to express, because they say a picture tells a story of 1,000 words, correct? So original communication before the FOX2 Pro gene, yes, and simpler communication was in pictures as well. You understand? So even early telepathy, if you think about it, to communicate, you're going to do so in pictures. So if I wanted to say, hey, look at the sun, I'm going to direct the image of the sun to the person. Do you understand? Once I have to say, look at the sun, that's a much more inefficient way of communicating. Once we have to put it in words and do you understand? It's more efficient, but it's more what they call sophisticated. Do you understand? But it's not the most efficient way of communicating. Do you understand? But as we evolved, Parnatharu gave us more complex ways because of the HAR1 gene, but a specific gene called FOX2 Pro gene, which led to us speaking more complex languages once it was activated or switched on in females first. Do you understand? 1,000 years before the males got it. So there's two different languages, but pictures is how we originally communicated. But when he's talking about specifically the Safaf, what one would describe is a coded language. You understand? And when those codes are unlocked and the sounds connected with them, it can unlock certain powers that have, as say, remained dormant. So there are secrets within that, which is why they're so eager to learn it. You understand? Because once you unlock the codes and the tones, then it can activate certain forces in you and in also in natural nature. So yes, so the Safaf is significant. You understand? And us learning how to read it is why it's been kind of, say spoon-fed, but you're getting pieces of it in books. So when you see it there, you need to pay attention to what's being shown, because it's just another way of communicating for us. Any other questions?
No further questions.
Okay. Right, and Mibab, any other questions?
No other questions.
Okay, so what's he saying here now? So basically, so when we die, as we've shown, I think previously, the gateway opens at a certain time in the morning. Do you understand? Between 2:30 and 2:30 and 3 a.m. Understand? It opens at this point, and so it allows us to cross over, yes, to the other side, and by connecting with our ancestors in this life while we're alive currently, because we stranded both etheric and physical, means that you have your ancestors there waiting, and that you will know them, understood, when you get to that point, and they will assist you, obviously, in being orientated now into your spiritual existence. Obviously, the challenge is that these gates that we were explaining before, which is very similar to how the atmosphere works. Obviously, at each of these gates, there are beings waiting there to basically throw you off the path to that ninth gate, so they can trick the individuals into being trapped in an area where the energy of their soul can be used to feed these discarnate entities. So the level of focus that's required and knowledge that one would have of why you're learning about things now is so that you don't get distracted, you understand, or deviate from the path, the guided path, which is going to help you navigate through to get to where you're supposed to be and cross over safely and also intact. You understand? Because, say, there's an opportunity there for you to be housed in that way. So taken advantage of, I should say. So yeah, this is just explained to us that obviously if you met the person, if you haven't met them, you're still going to be greeted, but the importance is us meeting them or establishing that connection, well, twofold really. Establishing that connection now creates a permanent connection with the Natharu. Yes. So in current life, obviously your ancestors are here to help you in your ascension journey, and so will help you to solve problems in this life, also protect you in this life, because you are the head of the genealogy, isn't it? Everybody who's lived before you, you happen to be at the head of the pyramid. So they've got a vested interest in making sure that you cross over to them correctly. Do you understand? Because if you're not with them, then it creates a problem that has to be fixed by future generations. You understand? So, but us knowing, as I say, is really powerful. You understand? Because, as I say, we've been ignoring this power for such a long time. So that pale white light, as I say, has a certain purpose, the correct one for us. So as you can see on the screen there, so go back to the same life if in an accident, you understand, or go back to a new life, you understand, and be allowed to visit a person still alive for up to 60 days. Some given the power to be seen, others only heard or felt. After 60 days must enter the gate at the exact time to begin reorientation, as a spiritual being, if not to return. So here we see, yes, obviously same life. So if you're going back to an accident, you're going to jump back in our same bloodline and potentially share with somebody up until the age of 9 years old. You understand? Go back into the white light again. So sometimes what happens is that you see, I died in such circumstances, my family's distressed, you understand? And because of that feeling, potentially of guilt or whatever, the energy of it can hold you here, you understand? Because you're attracted now to things which are here, where in order for you to ascend, because you're existing now as a mental being, you need to be free of that in order to move forward. Do you understand? So if you think about your living as a Ba'h B'ah, you understand? And the you understand? So the mental aspect of you has much more power and force. So if you're attracted to things here, you're going to be drawn down back again. You can't ascend well. So in order to deal with that, you may say, hey, I need time to, try and communicate with the family or pass on a certain message. So I can go, if I'm not going back, and if I want to start something new now in the next level of existence, I need to go there free of the weight or burden of maybe some of those responsibilities, etc. The difficulty, obviously, for us in that regard is that the family members who we're trying to contact may be vibrating on such a low level that you need to think about who you communicate with, because you can freak them out and different things of that nature. So us learning about these things means that we get to the other side now, or you're cognizant of this, meaning that if an entity appeared in a room at the, let's say after a close death or whatever the case may be, you're not going to freak out, or you're not going to be, you understand, as freaked out, which could potentially scare that energy away or whatever the case may be. Now, obviously, we've got to be mindful that there's forces around there that will mimic relatives and ancestors to try and take control of an individual. But obviously, this is something where, as I say, people can appear in dreams. You understand? Hey, I'm okay. You know what I mean? Try not to worry. Don't try not to be too distressed. I'm fine. I'm good. You understand? And then that helps the individuals left now to get on with their life, but also help you to get on with your ascension journey. You understand? So to us, that's the purpose of the pale white light. Now, there are other lights or white lights that can potentially throw off and you go through them accidentally or whatever, or be tricked into going to, which can lead you into other dimensions. So it's important that we're going through the right one, you understand, for this particular purpose, and then obviously we'll be guided there to whatever decision that you want to make. So you get up to 60 days. After that, as it's shown you there, you must go back in if you're not being reborn again, and then finish your orientation. Now, there are many reasons why people choose to go back, and one of those is basically because, or may deliberately go back even if they can go forward, is just simply because you may not have attained the level of, and I'm going to use the word strength loosely, but you may not be spiritually strong in that way, or past that level with what you feel is a necessary strength, which maybe in the next level of existence may make that orientation or life much more difficult. So you're born back then to try and re-strengthen or strengthen even more, or come out, symbolically speaking, with a higher grade. You understand? So as I say, I've said this example a few times, but if you come out with a 2-2 in the university sense in England, I'm not sure what the grades are in the States, but a 2-2 is the lowest grade. You understand? Yeah, and it leads to a different level of being able to get a job, career, etc., than coming out with a first. So a person may go back and say, okay, 2-2, not happy with that. Let me go back and try and get a first now, because a person with a first, their level of existence and what careers they can choose and is very different. So not that they've got university grades in the spiritual world, but in terms of your spiritual power, people may go back and say, no, let me try and go and balance out my being. So I'll come back stronger and then have maybe a better chance or different type of existence when I do my spiritual orientation. So some may choose to go back you know, having the option for that reason. And some might say, you know what, the physical life, man, I've had enough, man, I'm not going back. And so, you know what I mean, whatever it is, they just see, hey, this life's going to be better for me, so I'll work with what I got. Now, so obviously between that period, 2:30 to 3:30, you want to be in that facility, and then 3 a.m. opens. Now it's two-way, as you can see from verse 27. So being some other dimensions can cross over into this realm, as well as you going out the other way to get to where you're supposed to be in your realm of existence, that you're going to live out your spiritual life. Understood? But it works, as I say, in those instances, and also certain times, as you know, with that Hadron Collider and other types of machinery, in that sense, when they're trying to study subatomic particles, kicking energy into the electricity, specifically into the gigawatt range, can force some of these gateways open unnaturally, one may say, and it can allow, as I say, entities from other dimensions to come through. But this is the main one connected to this planet, the naturally occurring one. Now, as you can see here, which we've highlighted, some get trapped, others cross back over to start their judgment. As you are not judged for your actions while you're alive, you are judged by your actions and intentions while you're alive. So, which is interesting, isn't it? So when we look at the definition of perfection, then we can see that the two things have to align with each other. Yeah. So when we said earlier, in order to master this realm, you have to do some selfless acts. You understand? And have to be, you understand? As I say, Nikola Tesla level of service, but you do have to do something in the service of others. Now, if you were doing it and the intention didn't match the action, then that could be a fail. Do you understand? Because you're not sincere in how you're dealing with things. You understand? So be mindful of that. You understand how our mind thinks and how we think about things and why we're doing them, so on and so forth. In improving ourselves is equally important as what we're doing in itself. So the two things have to align and match up. And you guess who's the judge? Well, you're the judge. You know whether, you know what I mean, whether you did it sincerely or whether you did it insincerely. Everything in your thought patterns to your actions is being recorded in your DNA. Do you understand? And so, as it said, each part of your body can speak against you in when you need to be judged. Do you understand? Because the body knows, well, we knew what he or she did and what their intentions were behind that to match. You understand? So you are your own judge in that regard. Now, we have this other thing called a repent cycle, as you can see on the screen. Also got other names, so second resurrection or reincarnation rite. And so basically, this is where certain times you'd be in life and there was a sort of A route and there was a sort of B direction. You understand? Just to sort of give an example. Yeah. So it could be you've gone down this A route. Let's say there was a crossroads. You've gone down route A based on a decision that you've made. And let's say it was, I don't know, you invested in something because to help a friend or something of that nature. So you've gone down that particular route, and it's just caused a whole heap of problems. You understand? Yeah. And so in life, periodically, this keeps coming back up because it led to a number of different actions, which then just caused you a plethora of problems or whatever. You understand? Now, what happened is you may have been persuaded to go down that route by an individual. Ordinarily, maybe you wouldn't do it yourself. You understand? Maybe it was not your full intention or whatever. And so what happens is that creates a glitch on your personal disk. Do you understand? And so that regret now can lead to a repent cycle situation, do you understand, which is what's being described on the screen. You understand? So as it's saying, it's not an automatic happens every time, do you understand? But if the person said, hey, damn, I wish I didn't do that, then as it's saying here, while the descending masters look from above and the ascending masters watch from this realm, they meet and agree that it's a tawub, repent event. Those who were repenting, some in regret over and over again, they cried, why me? They were heard, and this is their answer. Yeah. So what happens is that basically, if they agree that it's a repent event, then what happens is that you basically get the opportunity to go through the multicolored light or spiral, and then basically you get born right back in that event again. Yeah, so you get born in the moment of the crossroads. Do you understand? So where you would have gone down route A before, yes, instead you go back, you go down route B, and everything that was related to what was the consequence of the A decision gets wiped out. Yeah, and then you start that life again right back at, and you go down to route B, and then all them adverse events that happen as a result of that choice, they get wiped off the record. You understand? That is called a repent event or repent cycle. Do you understand? In that context. Any questions? Yeah, I see a hand raised.
Yeah, there's a question here. I just need to pull it up. Right. Aaron has asked the question, when you say 3 a.m., does this mean 3 a.m. in each time zone? Individually, it opens up. So it happens many times throughout the 24-hour period.
That's a great question. From my understanding, it's 3 a.m., but I'm not aware of what cycle or time zone is the 3 a.m. Do you understand? Yeah, so but that is a good question. It's a very good question. But it's not opening multiple times based on time zones, because time zones are not real. But which time zone is the one where it opens, I'm not sure. So I'd have to find out. But it only opens once during the day, not multiple times. But that's a good question. Any other questions?
That is it from me.
Okay, I see a hand raised.
Let's have a look. Have a look. No hands raised.
Okay, let's see. Okay, I thought because it hadn't raised it. Okay, so here we see. So you can see here about this disc. Yeah. So say it creates a disc. So let's just jump into that just for a second so people understand what we're talking about. So in your life, yeah, so every person who's born, so from your zero time reference, which is from the moment of your inception, before conception, be conceived mentally with your parents, it creates what is referred to as your Surat, yeah, this time continuance liner. So that time continuance liner enables a record to be kept of your existence. Every thought, feeling, whatever that took place, action, etc., all stored on this disc, yeah, called Narad, or which is the word for disc. It's a crystal disc, understood? So when they talk about the dimensional shift, for example, what happens is that your existence, for example, can be stored onto this disc, yes? You then transferred from Earth, you understand, to its linked planet, you understand, Razak or Rizq, understood, and then basically reinserted into a new body, yeah, without all the errors and the mistakes of this physical body that occupies Earth. Yes, it can be put in all your experiences, etc., loaded into the new body with this disc. And even, say, more complex things can be done surrounding it. It's also known as a me stone. Some of you heard of that term, yeah, the ME or me stone. Yeah, it's also this disc. Now, I think there's a series on Netflix, I think it's called Altered Carbon. You understand? And it shows basically a similar concept, do you understand, of people's consciousness basically being inserted into on a disc, which then plugged into what they call these sleeves, yeah, which is their nickname for bodies. So as part of your own existence, not science fiction, but we have a similar ability, which is say is one of the ways in which a person, or part of our ability not only to reincarnate, but is what the technology that enables them to place or achieve what is called this repent cycle. You understand? Because of the issue that it creates on the record. You understand? So that's what they're seeking to eliminate, because you're stuck. And you can experience this in life, isn't it? You think about some moment of regret, and that even though time may cause that to subside, you think about it. You know what I'm saying? You might revisit it. It just comes up at a certain point in the year where maybe the incident took place. You don't realize it, but then you revisit in that incident time and time again. It might take you a minute to get back out of it in your system, but it's just a decision that's been made. You should think, damn, you understand? I wish I'd never done that. And then, yeah, you're stuck in that moment. Like, you see the record, remember the old school records, because there's young people on the phone. Old school records, remember it's spinning on the deck, and there's a scratch on the record, and it won't go past that point. It's ding, 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 it's stuck, and you have to forcibly move the needle. Do you understand? Same thing happened with CD, whatever the case may be. So this is what this is resolving. So this is what this is resolving, but it's not a right, as you can see. Ascending and descending masters. So ascending masters, you can see from definition there, are here watching. Descending masters are looking above, preventing that. So here, just to help you out, so one is here called a watcher, descending master, and the ascending master who is on this realm is referred to as a looker. So watchers above, looking down, lookers here, looking up, assigned to the individual. You understand? And as I say, we can authorize, if that's the best way to use it, a repent cycle. You understand? For say a bad, or what you consider to be a bad decision that one has made. You understand? So that me stone, let's just take that. Okay. Not sure what's happening there. So that me stone, as you can see here, even some technology used by the Anunnaki as well, so part of our technological range here. So they contain knowledge, you understand? And even in their Garden of Eden story, which I think we're covering in a few weeks, or revisiting the symbolism behind it, you can see that the different coloured stones represented certain knowledge. So red, obviously, was dealing with sexual knowledge, you understand, pleasures, stimulations, you understand, as you can see there. Knowledge of agreeable and disagreeable, good from bad, was the blue stone. And then green, knowledge of the tree of life, which I say we're going to get into the symbolism of those terms as well. That also ties into the red one, actually. But so the me stones represent different types of knowledge. So it's like a disc, essentially. And this is what we utilize to record a person's existence, and as I say, has the ability to be transported, into different locations, into different bodies, etc. So as you can see, an option like this is showing you that they're concerned with the experiences of one's soul. Do you understand? So this is where, as I say, not seeing it as in good, bad, hey, judgment-y situations. No, it's not that. It's more a thing of, well, you're a supreme being. You understand? You're in some instances new or young. You understand? Maybe even if you've gone around the cycle a few times or whatever, you're still young in the context of a life form in the universe that we're born within. You understand? So it's about a new life form, or us as souls, yeah, experiencing our ascension journey in the right types of ways. Now, so as you can see here, which is what I've explained, that, well, let's read it if it's important. So at the moment of your life where you made the mishap, mistake, or bad choice, you'll wake up that morning back in time and your disc will stop for a moment, and the nefadish negative event will be before you once again, and you'll have a strange feeling inside, an inner voice, an ancestor who says to you, don't do it, don't drink it, don't smoke it, don't touch it, to go in there, don't agree to this or that, don't meet that person, don't have sex with that person, don't use that drug or drink that alcohol, don't go to that party or wear that outfit or go wherever. And this time you'll say no and don't. 49, at that Sahut moment, your previous life is reactivated as if you never made that bad choice and you live a good normal life. And no, you don't remember your life, other life mistakes or bad choices. You don't meet or see the same persons. You have no aborted children or addictions. Understand? So if a person gets a repent cycle, you can see that's a big deal. You understand? Because obviously, yeah, it's definitely a second type of chance. Okay, any other questions?
Right. We have a question from Fernando, and I just have to do something here. Give me a second. Interruptions. Right, Fernando. Fernando, if you're listening, I'm having trouble in opening up Fernando on this. Right, Fernando, if you're listening, you should be able to speak now. Your mic is open, Fernando. Unmute your microphone. Give me a second. For some reason, they're right. Found him. Right, hello? Fernando, your mic's open now.
All right, hello?
Yeah, go ahead. Greetings, Fernando. You want to ask your question?
Okay, that's not a question. That is well, okay. You know, I was with you like whatever, 3 years. And after that, I started to see things in the street, people in different way. Some people like, I don't know how to say, that look like a bit ridiculous. Like aliens, there's people in different, but they're with us, and I start to become like a paranoia. And what else? And they start to follow me. I never did the crime. I never was whatever criminality. I never was. And they start to follow me all time until now. They start to follow me. The policy, like I was a criminal. I never did nothing. Since I came in that organization, all those things that come to me.
Excuse me, Fernando. Excuse me. I'm sorry to interrupt, but could you? What is your question? Do you have a question?
No question is I want to know what that happened, because since I come in that spirituality, that come to me. It's not about the question, because I know all what is it talking about. I know all what it's talking about.
Okay, because this forum is really for questions and answers, really.
Okay.
Thank you for your contribution, though. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Well, to maybe contribute to what you're saying there, what I'm saying to you, without specifically knowing what was the incident that took place, remember, when we start to be attracted to looking to find out who we are or find out about ourselves, which is in a book called Man from Planet Risk, it talks about people having what they call genetic explosions. So it's one of the reasons why, for example, I'm just going to put you back on mute there. So it's one of the reasons why, for example, you can approach somebody with, let's say, Wu-Sabat at a certain point and they're not ready for it. And then you come back a few years later and the person is open to it. So within a person's personal cycle, they are ready at a certain point to jump and go to that next level. Now, some people, for example, are spiritually gifted or open. And so when you start to then go down a path of developing oneself and finding out who you are, you're going to attract adverse six ether and negative forces, which is why Master Teacher obviously explained is that, you know, people who are even more open than that and spiritually aware have to discipline themselves. So that means, you know, taking control of diet, you understand, staying away from drugs, alcohol, things of that nature, because obviously, you know, it leaves people open to being in house and different things of that nature. Or if somebody sometimes takes the wrong type of things, you know, say indulging drugs, not saying you per se, so don't read it as that, but indulging drugs, it can force open certain instances, and you know, you can be housed or whatever by certain entities, and it can cause you a lot of difficulties and a lot of problems. So, as I say, I don't know if this question has come up before from you in a similar way, but you know, you need to make sure, or individuals certainly need to make sure, that they establish a connection with their ancestors. And we talked, and I think we even shared details about how one connects with their Salafu, because the oldest female in the family line is there to protect the genetic line. Do you understand? But in some instances, if people have opened doorways by indulging in rituals they shouldn't have done, or as I say, some people, they smoke weed for the first time, do you understand? And it forced open a gateway, and then they have continual problems with mental health and different things of that nature because they indulged in something they shouldn't have. They're not easy to close, do you understand, once it's open. So it may be a combination that person has to seek, say, esoteric help, or in some instances, medical help to control that situation if something has arisen. But if it's a spiritual problem, then, you know, obviously one's going to have to seek the assistance from their ancestors to resolve that situation in that regard. You know, so a lot of people sometimes, not saying you personally, Fernando, so don't take it as that, but a lot of people come around us, they ask us questions and we give certain guidance based on what's about our doctrine, and then they go off and do something else, go off and see some, I don't know, what they might call a soothsayer, or you know, want to get their palm read or some situation like that. Now that's cool if you want to do that, but if you don't do the proper research on the person or whatever, you can engage in things that open up gates in you, and then they're not easy to close, you understand? And so it can lead to mental health issues and different problems or whatever in that regard. But always a person has to be conscious. If you do anything where you're going down an agreeable path, then yeah, as we tried to explain to you before, it's like a pendulum swinging. So when you swing a pendulum in a direction, yes, what happens? It's going to come back with equal, and it's going to come back in the other direction with equal and opposite force. Do you understand? So if I wake up tomorrow and I say, for example, hey, if I was a smoker and I said, I'm not going to smoke tomorrow, you understand? And I stop immediately, I've swung that pendulum hard, isn't it, in one direction? Well, it's going to come back in equal and opposite, with equal and opposite force in the other direction. So my first day of trying to give up smoking is going to be really difficult. Do you understand? Second day is going to be really difficult. Those days are going to be difficult, but eventually the pendulum stops swinging, it slows down, isn't it? And it becomes more settled. So once you can get to the point, you understand, where it settles, then obviously you've shifted yourself up to a higher vibration, is it? You're not smoking every day, you understand, if that's the case, if it was an addiction. You understand? But you're now in a higher level of that, where basically, do you understand? I mean, you'll be able to control the temptation a bit more. And that might take a situation to knock you off that higher level, which leads you down now to lesser level of control, a bad day, or you understand, or someone's done you something, and then you revert back. But the higher you go and the longer that you're able to maintain it, your fall is not going to be as hard as when you first try to do it. Do you understand? And so you have to kind of see these things in that regard. But listen, Holy Tablets chapter 7, I think it's page 691, and talks to us about the chosen one. On to page 692, talks about us, the chosen one, who the Natharu basically set for our race, who is the level, and they set a standard that we have to hit and obtain. And it talks to us about the fact that much of the problems that we have in our life and the difficulties that we have in our life is when we're not trying to be like unto that chosen one, or when we're not trying to reach that level that's been set for our race. You understand? This is the source, it says, of our difficulty. And most of us, if we're honest, you understand, it's because there's a battle now that takes place when you step down that path of becoming who you are according to nature, and you live in the life that you were living before. Do you understand? And if you don't orientate your life, which is very difficult in this environment, orientate your life to the who you are, well, of course, you can have difficulties in this life. It's not set up to progress that journey, which is one of the reasons we expressed and we were taught we have to have our own land. Yeah, because environment is key. 24% of your DNA reacts to the environment that's in and around you. So there are forces here, of course, they're going to be working against you, which is why you were taught you must have your psychic self-defense and things of that nature. So when bad incidents happen, your protection's in place that doesn't cause your countenance to drop to levels where you're exposed to more harm than you should do. Yeah, no one said this life was going to be easy, but as I say, you know, we need to sometimes make better decisions, and as I say, make sure we've got certain protections in place, which is why ancestral connection is really important, do you understand? And connecting with our own Natharu, that also calling upon them and making sure that they're watching over us, so that the forces that we see, you understand, get dealt with, and the forces that we don't see are also dealt with. Any other questions?
I'm just checking, chat. There is no further questions. Yeah, what you've just given to Fernando, he still indulges in a little bit of a tipple, so I probably needs to slow down on that. But yeah, there's no further questions. You've just put that on the chat.
No problem, no problem. Everybody's, you know, day by day, you understand, day by day. But obviously, alcohol opens you up, which is why they say to us, it's a general thing. Not say you say to not drink for that reason, because some people they could drink alcohol, they could drink a whole, whatever, bottle of whatever it is. I'm thinking about drinks, brandy or whatever, and not be affected. The next person drinks a cap full of brandy and are fully opened up. Do you understand? So remember the old pubs in England were called gin meals. You understand? So yeah, and jinn is a mythological creature in the Islamic degree, isn't it? That is a spiritual discarnate entity that inhouses individuals, who participate in alcohol. Remember, they're called spirits for a reason. So you need to understand that's what the danger of it is. So one person might be sensitive to it, another person may be less sensitive to it. So the master teacher, generally speaking, gives general advice so that it's just best don't do it. You understand? Now that doesn't mean to say that we never drank alcohol, because the ancient Egyptians created beer. You understand? So it doesn't mean that we didn't drink alcohol, but obviously the day and time we're in, you know what it's set up to do. Now, residual haunt is another characteristic. So talk to you about a repent event, talk to you about the influence of rules around murder or killing. And so this is another type of event, residual haunt, and it's basically where somebody can get locked into an incident. So verse 56, so it says, this person who tempted the time of their qadar, fate, much like the Mu'addam or Adamites who tempt the hand of fate by dangerous sports and death-defying test of ego and results in their own death, or those who cause their own death in a traumatic ways by doing it to themselves or inciting another to stop their life, a murder or accident. 57. This is a glitch in the disc, and the result, like a chip record, it repeats at that exact zahut moment over and over again, can be seen as a tayaf ghost form is caused by the instant trauma of the event, and it will repeat over and over or around and around for up to 24,000 times, then fade out. 58. Much the same as when you hold a video camera to a bright light, it burns a spot on or in the lens which slowly fades out. It is caused by the instant trauma of the event, and it will repeat over and over or around and around for up to 24,000 times and then fade out. So this is one of the reasons. You think about some of the death rituals and things of that nature as well. Death rituals that we would perform here in the physical, would help to, for example, unlock somebody who was trapped in this type of event. Do you understand? You think about somebody dies in a particular incident or is murdered. Do you understand? Unexpectedly for them, at least, or unexpectedly for the family. Our rituals, you understand, that we do as us here in the living can help unlock this type of situation. We get this residual haunt where the person's locked in to that cycle, especially if it comes as a surprise, you understand? So the moment itself keeps reliving itself, at least in the person's mind. And we know trauma will do that, you understand? Even in the context of when we're living now, where death is not the result, the impact of trauma can be so significant, isn't it? So even in our own lives now, if anybody's experienced a traumatic event in this life or whatever, knows that it can cause serious mental health issues, where you can't get out of that particular incident that's taken place. So very important on the other side of us having the right prayers and rituals, which, as I say, can unlock the person out of the event and then obviously force them into whatever it may be, whether it's the 60-day situation where they can take care of their affairs, or whatever they try to do, come back or move on. This is an incident that you don't want to find oneself in. So it's all that tempting fate, you understand? Now, we've been taught of doing certain things for fun, you understand? What they call recreation. And so, you have to be guarded, I suppose, in what you choose to do. Not to say that you're not going to have fun and different things of that nature, but you know, you have to think sometimes, you know, how you're moving. If you're going on the motorway and racing in the sand, your friend in a car or whatever, and then you crash as a result of that, then you know, this could be the potential outcome of that you get locked into that, especially if you wasn't expecting to die. You understand? So very important, and obviously people see certain things as well, isn't it? You know, maybe go past a certain point and people see a ghost coming there at a certain time each year or whatever, you understand, appears because that was when the accident took place or whatever, and then it gets all these fancy names, you understand. I don't know, Maria's Cove, you understand, because Maria died at that particular point, you understand, it gets a certain name. Because so this is what these things can happen and takes place. So you don't want it to be in a situation where that's the result. So again, as I say, ritualistically, there are certain prayers that we can do to help the person and call upon their ancestors on their behalf as members of their family, to help unlock them out of that situation. Okay. So reincarnation. So what do we mean by reincarnation? Well, this is sort of going over some of the things that we've talked about. So we talked about so you've got two obviously aspects. We talked about one, going back and using somebody else's body, or coming back in and being reborn in a new life, obviously in a different body, to come back around again, obviously, and use one of those 24,000 cycle opportunities to balance out, say, one's being and seek to master this realm and achieve perfection. So this resurrection, we talk about resurrection, that is a religious concept, and basically, when they talk about it in that context, there's no proof of it being a reality. Do you understand? So the reality of the situation is that they talk about resurrecting. So Lazarus, for example, being resurrected. But according to their rules or their religious laws, if he was resurrected, Lazarus should still be walking around today, because when you're resurrected, according to those rules, you can't die again. So he should still be around to be able to state and claim, hey, I'm Lazarus, this is what Jesus did, boom, I'm here, proof, yeah, this is me. You understand? Yeah, that I should be around, and proof that this actually happened and existed. Now, what some confusion can happen, remember, is that you can be resuscitated. You understand? Yeah. So you can die, for example, and somebody restarts your heart, for example, in that instance, where you can be resuscitated. Now, if that happens in a quick enough time where, you know, you're still getting oxygen to the brain, then you can be resuscitated and broadly, you're saying your faculties fully intact. If, however, oxygen is denied to the brain, understood, so the blood flow, etc., interrupts to the brain, then you know the person body can be resuscitated, but the person is brain dead. So that connection, that where the brain is having access and hosting the mental aspect to that being, so the mind can be cut off. So the body's alive, but the brain is non-responsive. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because that connection has been severed. You understand? So you've got resuscitation, and then you've got the religious concept. You understand? Yeah, of resurrection, which they haven't proven exists. And so the Lazarus situation is one of those. You understand? Where in actuality, well, if he was resurrected, he should be still walking about today, because a man is given but once to die. You Understand? Yeah, so in that regard. So these are different ways in which, say, these different rules pertaining to the rules around death can be stimulated. Now, there are some situations, for example, when you talk about the raising of the dead as far as zombies and things of that nature. But that's more to do with the fact that, as you may fully be aware, energy within the body that's been housed by the body obviously can be, or soul energy, for example, can last in a dead body up to 1,000 years. This is why sometimes when they open up these mummies or these tombs of mummies, they can see that the hair's still growing, the nails have still been growing, and things of that nature. So some residual energy still resides in there. And as I say, in certain instances, discarnate entities can obviously in-house bodies, and if powerful enough, can cause objects in the physical to move. You understand? And so, yeah, certain viruses or certain diseases can certainly, cause or in-house certain physical entities, or it be animal or dead human, and this can allow, as I say, some of these spirit forces to control or take control of carnate entities. Do you understand? That may appear or are dead as far as physically concerned, but can still be housed by entities that we don't see. Do you understand? So one of the things that you have to realize is that whilst you as Nagaru, having those three characteristics that we explained earlier, the Ka'a, the Aha, or the etheric part of you, and the Ba'ah, the soul, the Caucasian doesn't have soul. So they do, so where their ascension journey, when they're going back through the white light, remember, they're trapped in this realm. So where they're thinking they're maybe going somewhere else or ascending, they're trapped here and then dominated and tortured by their lower forces or entities. Understood? So so one has to realize that the ascension journey is not the same for all parties on the planet. Do you understand? So we have soul, they lost theirs, understand, or that connection to the mental. Ours, as I say, has to be restored whilst we're here in the living. Do you understand? So we don't want to do things that cut off that connection, so to speak. And so, you understand, part of Wu-Sabat, or your science, and the esoteric and spiritual activities designed, as I say, to help realign you once again, is helping with the restoration, understand, of that soul. Now, as I say, as you are aware, the woman is transformed first by natural nature, and then she then transforms her man, understand, because she's still in tune with the cosmos through solar and lunar biological processes. So a menstrual cycle, for example, is still tied into the 4 phases of the moon, and so she still has that cosmic link, as it were. It's not been broken, so she still retains that. So as the planet, as nature's transformed, that transformation is then, she's going to feel that, obviously. She has the right characteristics, right vibration. She's going to feel that, and therefore she has the power to transform her man. Okay, so okay, so we've covered that. Yeah, so that's just a few areas, as we explained, that pertain to the rules of death. The important thing about looking at these safafat and these hieroglyphs that we were showing a bit earlier is that they are obviously giving an indication, as we was explaining to the question that was asked earlier, about things that are to come. Because obviously you don't, knowing is after the event. Do you understand? So you're not going to know until it happens. But what these symbols are designed to do, as I say, is give you an opening into what takes place, do you understand, in the world that we don't see. Do you understand? So we are energy beings. This is why we refer to ourselves as animists. Understood? And so we're energy beings who are passing through this life. You understand? Where we inherit that secondary soul and spirit. You understand? Spirit as the nafas, which is our personality, DNA, RNA, and the ruh soul, which is the breath soul, our solar plexus, the lit sun within us. Understood? But we were a thing before we became something. Understood? And then when we are something, yeah, some of that some gets removed and we become a thing again. And so in order to continue and progress our journey to achieve perfection. So the four suns, yeah, and when we look at symbolism, as we explained earlier, they allude to giving you some insight, yeah, of what is to take place. Because if you think about it, the sun doesn't move. Yeah, it doesn't move, correct? So there wouldn't be four suns because the sun doesn't go anywhere. It's an overlay, yeah, against the life journey. If you think about it, the part that we ignored, as we explained in one of the classes, is that fourth point. Yeah, the female, the fourth point. Yeah, life, living, lived in the sun, but there's still existence here in the darkness. Understood? Yeah. So you see there, it's female because these are balanced positions. Understood? In the in this cycle, and they're balanced points, and they're not quite. Whereas these are extreme points. If you overlay the seasons, for example, this would be spring, and this would be autumn. In the sand, for example, depending on where you were on the planet, of course. In the sand, then obviously male, winter, male, summer as the extreme positions. You understand? So that double X chromosome, yeah, it shows it communicates a balanced position. Do you understand? So the light of life is cut on. Do you understand? Yeah, because when we take our first breath, but we existed in the darkness, understood, before we became, were born into the physical with that skin suit that was placed around us. Yeah, so the symbols, I say, are important to give you insight to what's taking place next. Now, it's better to be prepared than unprepared. You understand? So, and as we say all the time, those our ancient Egyptian ancestral rulers prepared for death a long way while they were living. They didn't wait to the point of expiry before they started preparing for the next level of journey. So they had a different attitude to how they saw death. They saw death as a bawab, a doorway, understood, into the next level of existence, not the end, you understand, of all existence for them. Yeah? So if you have that kind of attitude, then you're preparing now for liberty beforehand. So this is where the master now giving us what? The master's secrets, yeah, that next level of outformation to prepare you. But you had to go through a journey where, you know, loosely, if I use that word loosely, trusting, you understand, the ability for somebody to deliver facts and then now seek your own confirmation, yeah, of that which you can't see by looking at symbolism and clues left by your ancestors in that regard, alluding to, as say, higher levels of existence, and those who obviously are sincere, prove themselves, so on and so forth, you know, by way of evidence, obviously experience as well, you understand, people have experienced and seen things, but then reasoning, which is important skill and characteristic and ability that we have, is to see reason out that which we can't see, because all of the necessary clues are not in place, but there are things which point to existence past, as I say, when you define what life is. You understand? So what would be before life, you understand, and then what would be after life, because we existed before, even if it's only as in the minds, you understand, of our family, we were a thing before we became something at the point of conception, where we now were detected, you understand, in space, matter and time, at least in the physical. Any other questions then before we close out, because it's just going to jump us to a next section, so we might as well start a new section where we're dealing with the pineal gland and perception for the next class. Yeah, so any questions around
no questions at this time,
and no questions here.
Okay, so we'll kick on with the pineal gland next class. Let's just go in. And do some interesting things around maths and the numbers, or symbolism of numbers. So do some stuff around that, and get into the structure of the human brain, what's the difference between male and female sides of the brain, and why sacred feminine think differently from men. I think we said we would do that last time, didn't quite get to it, but we'll do that this time in some detail. So understand the numbers. You want to do any pre-prep or whatever, then maybe look at sort of binary number system, find out what that is, and then we'll show you what it really means in our culture, about a two-state scenario. Understood? But as we were showing you with those symbols earlier, even just at different shapes and being inverted, when we use numbers and we associate to certain things, they're not absolutes. So we're going to just show you an example around that, to do with males and females. But also it should explain to you why Parnatharu had to restore the woman back to power as well. You understand? Because it ties into where this planet, through the dimensional shift, I think that was just one of the slides there, to say that the dimensional shift, I think that was one of the slides there, wasn't it? The dimensional shift has already took place. Do you understand? Yeah, this was oh, there we go, look here, imagine that. That dimensional shift has already happened. Yeah, already happened. So when you understand the significance of that, you understand that we are moving towards liberty, that effectively means that we're becoming more mental than physical. Yeah, more mental than physical. And when you understand that, or when we go to explain it, you'll understand fully why it was necessary in the consequence of this shift and all the things that are taking place, how everything's now, all these different cycles are lining up now together, why it was important, as I say, to restore the woman back to power to aid this next step in our evolutionary process and our ascension journey as a race, as well as males and females. Understood. Well, if there's nothing else then, thank you for staying a bit longer than our usual finish time. So the next class is going to be on 2 weeks Sunday. So I'm trying to think, what date is that now? It's not lighting up for me. So what's 2 weeks now? I think is that the 17th? My maths, is that the 17th? Yes, the 17th of July will be the next class. We'll be talking about those issues that I'll be going through. If you do want more information on some of the subjects we've covered today, sort of key books are Spiritual You After the Physical You Dies, Master's Secret. Also, Mother Circle of Existence, if you want more information about the transgender, or I suppose different beings or spirit beings in housing children to fill out life after an accident. That's in that scroll. And also, well, obviously Lotus of Life, so we're discussing that in some detail. So those are 3 main books. If you see that from your local All Eyes in Egypt store, or as I say, check out our classes on the YouTube channel, All Eyes in Egypt, Midlands and North. We can go back over any of the classes that we've delivered thus far. So is there nothing else? Yeah, we will close out for today. Tawakum, thanks all for attending today once again, and we will pick up this very important subject in 2 weeks' time. So I trust that you'll join us and let those of you feel it may be of interest to share those details with them also. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe, take care, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Okay, Wadu.